in 1950 for the fire marshal report, he tells them that the mask just sat on the back porch for 10 days. When Detective Tinsley called to inform them that he would be by to retrieve it, they moved the box from wherever it was to the back steps, where it is believed that the garbage men grabbed it, believing it was trash. And no one ever saw the mask or the box again.
So there's multiple witnesses that saw this liver in a box. What?
An animal beef liver.
What?
That the fire chief
So what you're telling me is people have always been crazy.
buried.
I mean,
Welcome to Creepalachia. It's time to dive into the Sodder children disappearance. And who better to do that with than family? We are joined by Miranda Weeks, who is the great-great-grandchild of Joseph Sodder, who is one of the children of George and Jennie Sodder.
Great-granddaughter of Joseph Sodder.
Or you're the great-granddaughter.
Yes,
of
great-great-granddaughter of Jennie and George.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, making the trip from Texas, which you grew up in Fayetteville, right?
Yes, I grew up in Fayetteville.
Awesome. So let's dive into you. Give me some backstory on you and your life and how you're connected to this.
Okay. So my name's Miranda, and as he said, I'm the great-great-granddaughter of George and Jennie. Their second son, Joe, that was in the army when the fire happened, was my pawpaw. And I was born and raised in Fayetteville until I was 14. And then my family and I moved to a different part of West Virginia. I went to Marshall University, where I majored in criminal justice. And now I live in Texas with my boyfriend of 3 years, our dog Wilbur, and our 3 cats. Da Vinci, Thorn, and Leela.
nice.
For my Futurama fans, yes, Leela is from Futurama.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Futurama. That's the one with the robot and the, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, cool. And we had some Sphinx snuggle time
Nice.
Yes.
before this. So
I'd never met a Sphinx cat, so it was a good experience.
Were they nice to you? or-
Yeah, they were
They're
nice.
very judgy.
yeah,
They're sweet though, but
Aren't all cats judgy? I mean,
that's true.
that's part
They're
of
very
being,
particular.
yeah, it's part of being a kitty cat.
Yes.
But yeah, and we drove out to the gravesite of George and Jennie.
Mhm.
So thank you for allowing me to tag along for that. All right, so let's start out for people who have no clue what we're even talking about. Can you tell the story of the Sodder children and what happened in the 40s?
Mhm.
So take us back there.
Do you want me to do a short version, or do you
Do a
want
long
me to,
version.
You want me to go ahead and get into everything that I'm
Yeah,
doing?
as detailed as we. This is no time limit.
Yeah. Okay. So, first I'll just say that, I have known about this story my whole life. But I always thought that it was a huge mystery, until I started looking into it, and it's not that much of a mystery. But, ever since I was little, I just knew that one day I was going to grow up and look into this at some point. And there was even a time where I was telling my best friend about this when I was like 8 years old, and I told her that I'm going to grow up and I'm going to figure this out. And we were talking to her papa about it, who was basically like my grandfather too, and he in my mind, nobody knew about this.
Mhm.
I thought it was just a family thing. I didn't expect him to know what it was. And so I told him, and I wasn't going to say the part where I thought I was going to grow up and figure it out, because telling your best friend that is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Telling an adult that is another. But of course, my best friend was like, oh, and Miranda, she's going to grow up and she's going to figure it out. And her papa looks at me and he laughed and he said, kid, they've been trying to figure that out for decades. They're never going to figure out what happened to those kids. And that was the moment that I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong.
Heck yeah. And Jozy, I'm a jerk. I didn't get you a water. Are you okay?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And
We'll find out later.
Yeah. So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong. So basically was it 1945?
Yes.
December, Christmas Eve.
Yes.
a fire occurs. So walk us through the events of that night as you understand it.
Okay.
And do you have a definitive, you have a theory of like, which we're going to get into.
Yes.
But no spoilers ahead of that.
Yes, I will. I'll get into it once I, lay everything out for everybody.
Yeah. Perfect. Go right ahead as you want to.
Before I get into it, I do want to address some things first, just because this is such a big story and, it's been talked about all over the internet, all over the world, really. And I think it's really important for everyone to remember that this isn't just a story. Like, these were real people, and, they had such a traumatic thing happen to them that they didn't deserve, really. And but they fought for their kids for the rest of their lives, and they never gave up. And despite what they went through, they never stopped being kind, intelligent people, and continued to be loving and caring parents to their remaining children. They just wanted to know the truth, whatever it may be. So just remember, whenever you're discussing this case, to just be kind, because, discussing theories about cases is one thing. But, making baseless accusations without proof isn't. George and Jennie may not be here to see you accuse them of killing their kids, or accuse you of, not you guys, but I'm just saying, like, in general.
Yeah.
In general.
We're good, Jozy.
or abusing them. But that doesn't mean that the people that are still here, that love and care about them, should have to read stuff like that. And it's also important to remember how different times were back then, because, people are always like, oh, well, they had 10 kids, they couldn't have taken care of all of them. But, like, 10 kids was not weird back then. People had way more than 10 kids.
Oh, yeah. Baker's dozen was pretty normal.
Yes, everybody had at least more than like 5 kids back then. And also just, remember to respect people's privacy. If a family member says not to contact them, like, don't contact them. And this goes for, like, not just this case, like every case, every true crime case out there. Okay, so
sure, no, that's good. And they had a Billboard up for 40 years. You was telling me?
40 years.
Yeah, a lot of people have seen a Billboard with the 5 children who were lost in this fire. Supposedly lost in this fire. So yeah.
Yeah, you if you grew up in Fayetteville, like, you remember that billboard. Like, when was going around town, trying to find out more information, every single person, as soon as I said Sodder, they were like, "Oh, the billboard! Oh, the billboard!" Like, it's well known.
And it wasn't far from where the fire took place, right?
It was on the property still.
It's on the property.
Yeah, they lived on the property until they died. Yeah, it was they built, like, a privacy fence, but the billboard was, like, right outside, like, right on the side of the road.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was, and the road that it's on is, like, I don't know about back then, but it is a well-traveled road. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have to get on it in order to get to, I think, Montgomery. I think you have to go out that way to get to Montgomery.
Yeah. And I'll tell you how dumb I am, Jozy. So I kept on saying, we decided not to drive out there because I leave people alone, first off. But I was like, I was thinking, like, oh, yeah, we'll drive out and see the house. But there is no house. That's how dumb I am. So just know that going in, listeners, that I'm the least expert on anything. But yeah, I appreciate you taking me out to see the grave, because it is a very which, graveyards as a whole I like going to because it's just peaceful, but also knowing the history behind this one, I just really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, of course.
I have an article that has the billboard picture in it.
Okay, where is it at?
If you go to the Sodder.
Okay, Sodder file. So we've got super access to this thing called Newspaper Archive.
I actually named it. Scroll down. It should say Billboard.
Should say Billboard. Okay, let's. Oh, I got it. Okay, so right click this, open in new tab.
So it's September 11th, 1953, and I believe that's when they first put up the billboard.
Let me zoom in here. So, my goodness.
At the top left corner of the page.
Top left corner of the page. All right.
There it is.
Click and drag. All right, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. I'll bring it up on the screen here so everyone will see. This is from the actual newspaper. What's the date on this newspaper?
September 11th, 1953. It was in the Beckley Post-Herald newspaper.
Is that when it first was erected?
That's what the article, or that's what the headline says. Billboard erected at scene of fire.
Gotcha.
I think I have it in here somewhere. I'll talk about it later. It was,
cool.
I don't remember if it was in 1953 or 1952, but it was, sometime around that time.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We got some show and tell going. Appreciate it. All right. So take us back, Miranda. Where do you want to start on laying this out for people who's never heard the story?
Well, first I do want to mention that, while I am a family member, that does not make me an expert. And I wouldn't even be here without the youngest Sodder child's daughter. The youngest Sodder child's name was Sylvia. Her daughter is also named Jenny. And she's, the reason I'm here, really. She sent me everything, and she's been such a big help.
And y'all don't have like get-togethers, like family reunions where you cook hot dogs and like, hey.
I've actually never met Jenny. We've only ever talked on the phone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, we got to get a Sodder family reunion going. Okay. I'm going to announce it here on the podcast. We gotta do this. Let's go to Grandview, play on the swings. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll just see a squirrel and then I got to chase it. All right.
Also, it's also important to remember this is an 80-year-old case. So a lot of what I have, while it does come from, a lot of the documents, a lot of this is also, secondhand information. Sure. But if I ever come across something that contradicts whatever I say today, I'll admit it, But this is what I've put together so far.
Or I'll go ahead and tell people this is 100% factual. You will hear right today. This is, I'm just, take it all with a grain of salt. But here is can we start with the typical narrative? Like of that people generally know, and then. Yeah.
So the basic story is that on Christmas Eve, 1945, George and Jennie and 9 of their 10 kids were in the house. And 5 of those kids, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, asked to stay up late. And everybody else went to bed. And then around 12:30, Jenny woke up to a phone call. And it was a wrong number. They claim it was a wrong number. And she goes back to bed, and then about an hour later, a half an hour later, she wakes up to the smell of smoke and finds that the house is on fire. And she, so the house was 2 stories, and the kids normally slept upstairs. Sylvia, since she was only 4, she slept in her parents' room. And that night, Marion slept on the couch, but she normally liked to sleep on the couch. So she yells upstairs to the kids that there's a fire, and all of the kids are able to get out except for the 5 that stayed up that night. And they tried really hard to be able to get the kids out. George went around and smashed the window that led to the landing the stairs that went upstairs, and he ended up cutting his arm really badly. But the fire was so bad at that point that he couldn't get in. And then he went to get a ladder that they kept on the side of the house. The ladder was gone. And they tried to start the trucks, but the trucks, he just in his hurry, he choked it too hard and they couldn't get the trucks to start. And a passerby ended up being able to reach the fire chief. And when he told him the Sodders house was on fire, the chief was like, yeah, we already know that. And he was like, okay, are you going to go out there? And he was like, we don't know. And so 8 hours later, they show up. The house is already completely burned to the ground. And they do a search for like a couple of hours. They don't find any remains. And they tell George and Jennie to just put some dirt in a box and bury it and have a funeral. And that they closed the case. They said, it was defective wiring. Even though they didn't do an investigation at all. And they
It's important to put it in context if you're saying, like, why didn't the fire department go out there, boy? So the war was going on.
Yes.
And so kind of tell me that. You was telling me in the truck.
Yes. So the fire department was short-staffed back then due to the war. They didn't have as many because it was volunteer. And so there weren't as many people back then. And the fire chief did not know how to start the fire truck. So how and calls back then were you had to reach an operator and then the operator had to connect you. So it was kind of like a phone tree thing.
Yeah.
So they would like call one person and then that person would call a person, that would call a person. And but why it took 8 hours.
And there were issues with the operator, like getting a hold of an operator.
Yes.
Right?
So that's why. So it's not for sure, but the guy that passed the house. So first he went to a bar and the bar owner said that the phone was out of order.
Mm-hmm.
And then because Marion, the oldest daughter, had ran to a neighbor's house and the operator wasn't available.
Yeah.
And then the passerby, he ended up, it's believed that he drove to the chief's house and told him what was going on.
Sure. And obviously the big mystery of this is there was never any bones or anything found except for, well, there was some vertebrae, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Found later. But that day the stove was still left behind. They found coins that were burned and unburned. They found part of the book. They found pieces of clothing. They found toys, like kitchen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They found stuff like in the debris. They just didn't find the remains.
And there's 2 black and white photos that were published in the morning and the evening papers.
Okay.
Yes, they're very hard to see, but yes.
So this was the...
This is the morning, correct?
That was the evening paper.
Oh, this is morning. It says Wednesday morning, December 26th, 1945. 5 children die in Fayetteville fire. And there's a photo that is...
It says, only rubble remains of the Sodder family frame bungalow after the fire early Christmas morning, which claimed the lives of 5 of their children. The tragedy came after the family had prepared a gala Christmas reunion. Spectators view the ruins.
And the fire chief was Forrest Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And looking here, it looks like there's a few people that kind of look like Men in Black type people, but not in the conspiracy theory way. They just have, I mean, it's black and white photo, but they have suits and ties and top hats on.
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting.
Yeah. And then the Raleigh Register has what looks like an exterior shot. It's again black and white, so it's very.
Is this the evening or the morning paper?
I guess if that's the so this is the morning. There's another.
Okay, I got.
That's the evening. That's the evening.
Gotcha. I got the evening here. I'm going to zoom in.
Yeah.
So it says remains of 5 children sought in ruins of home demolished by fire Xmas morning, and the photo. It just looks like, something burnt down.
Yeah. And this is
it's very low res.
December 26, 1945. So 2 days after.
But the way that they talk in the paper, it seems as if this all came from December 25th. They just didn't publish it until the 26th.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a quote too that I think it's in the Beckley Raleigh Register. Is it this one?
Is that the evening or the morning one? Or is this
It might be, but it's John saying that I think somebody set the fire.
Oh yeah. From
the very beginnings, it was questioned whether or not
it was accidental.
Right. Yeah. Fire was accidental or not.
Do you have the exact quote in there that you can read?
Yeah. So it says, because he talks about kind of what happened. I'm going to have to.
I'll just go ahead and find it. So,
okay. It says, it's a quote from him. Let's see. My eyesight is terrible.
Let it rip.
It said John, who returned only a week ago after 3 years of service in the Army, told this story of the fire. Mother and father went to bed. So this is, he was not there at the time.
Okay.
Or no, he had.
Well,
No,
Wait,
John. Yeah, John
he had
was
just
there.
returned. No.
Yeah, John just came back from the
Okay.
from the war, but he was there that night.
He was.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, Joseph
There's a
was
lot of
the only
people
one.
named the same thing.
Yes, it's very
and
confusing.
so it's very, okay. But this is the story that John, the son, told the newspaper. He said, Mother and father went to bed about 10:30. We went to sleep upstairs about 11:15 or 11:30. We had everything ready for Christmas. There was a set of Christmas lights in the window of Mother's bedroom. I was in the same bed as George Jr. He woke me up. I came down expecting to help put the fire out. When I got to the door, flames were already there and I couldn't get back. Fire had swept from the place to where the desk was to the front door. George had started trying to wake the others up. I guess they either didn't wake or didn't move fast enough. I think somebody set the fire, he added. And then it says John's ear was singed. His cousin, Joseph Cipriani, stayed with him Tuesday. But so that, I mean, that's literally the day, like, that
First
was his
account,
perception
Mhm.
The day
within
after.
hours of it happening, you know.
Yeah.
Which is important because, I mean, 80 years, there's a lot that's going to be lost in translation. So that's obviously, I mean, and in the 40s, you know, QAnon wasn't around on Reddit. It's just like he just said what he thought.
Mhm.
So
Well, and
It wasn't
I'll
really
get
a
into
conspiracy.
Why they thought that it was.
oh yeah, we're going to get into some deets. And it looks like about 1:30 a.m. on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah. So technically it was Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what's the first deet? And show people this binder. Where's it at? We got to show them how serious Miranda's taking this. We got a lot of, show them the thickness there. We
Yeah,
got,
thickness.
yeah.
This isn't even, I'm not even done, really. I have more to add to this. But this is what I have so far. Yeah.
Small fraction of what she has done, but it's about 3 inches thick. So we're going to get into one by one as many details until our voices don't work, or Miranda's like, you know what, I gotta go back to Texas.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start?
So first I want to talk about George and Jennie and their family. I want to talk about before the fire, and then I'll get into the fire.
Sure.
So I'm going to tell this how they experienced it, and then afterwards, after I detail everything, I will talk about what the fire marshal claims happened in their reports.
Perfect.
But it's important to realize that even though George and Jennie repeatedly asked for evidence that their children died in the fire, they were never given it, and they were never shown these reports. The first, as far as we know, the first Sodder family member to see these official reports was Sylvia, their youngest daughter, and this was around 2007. Because FOIA wasn't a thing back then. And I will back this up later, but we can't trust what was in the official reports.
Sure. Conspiracies. I got my tinfoil hat ready.
Yeah. So George and Jennie Sodder were both originally from Italy. So George was born Giorgio Sodder on November 24th, 1897. But his gravestone does say 1895. We're not 100% sure what year he was born, but he says that he came to the United States from Italy at 13. So that would have made his birth year 1897.
Yeah, which is pretty typical. Like we were talking at the gravesite, like immigrants regularly had their names changed, and documentation was not that good back then. So yeah.
He was originally born in Sardinia, Italy. I will butcher some of these names. I'm sorry, everybody, but
is that where sardines come from?
Some of these names are hard to pronounce. But he came to the U.S. through Ellis Island in 1911. accompanied by an older brother named Leo. His brother didn't stay here very long. He eventually went back to Italy, and George was by himself. Not much is known about why he decided to come to America, and it's not a lot is known about his time prior to coming to West Virginia either. It is known that he lived in Pennsylvania and Michigan. He worked on the railroads. On a draft registration card from 1917, he states that he was working and still sending money back to his parents in Italy, which was a common thing back then. And then sometime in the early 1920s, he arrived in Smithers, West Virginia, and worked in the coal mines and as a taxi driver. And Smithers is where he would meet his wife, Jennie. And their granddaughter, Jennie, tells me that George was a voracious reader. He loved to read. Anything he could get his hands on, he would read. And he even, he was constantly trying to improve his English. And he would even read dictionaries in order to help him with that. And Jennie was born Jennie Loriessa. I hope I said that right.
That sounds great.
Cipriani on March 2nd, 1903 in Troia, Italy. And she was the second born of 6 siblings, 2 boys and 4 girls. She came to America with her parents in 1904. They lived briefly in Pennsylvania. Show the first one.
This first one?
Yeah. So that's, I don't know. I'm not sure how old she was in this, but
where'd it go?
And I sent you all these too. They're in a Google Drive.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let me pull that up. Keep talking.
Okay. They lived in Pennsylvania and eventually moved to Smithers, where her father, Joseph Cipriani, opened a store called The Music Box. Jennie would work there sometimes, and that's where she met George. And they were married on November 4th, 1922. It is known that Jennie was supposed to marry somebody else. It's not known who. She was expected to marry somebody else, but she met and fell in love with George, and they got married instead. George and Jennie lived in Smithers until 1935, when they decided to move to Fayetteville. By then, they had already had 7 children: John, Joe, Marion, George Jr. But from now on, I will refer to him as Ted because that's what everybody calls him.
Gotcha.
And
George Jr.'s Ted?
Yes, George Jr.'s Ted. Maurice, Martha, and Lewis. George decided to leave the coal mines and began working for local businessman Lorenzo Giannullo, who co-owned Giannullo and Company with his first cousin, Clemente Giannullo. Whenever Lorenzo comes up from now on, I'm just going to call him Giannullo so I don't butcher his name every time. And his cousin I'll refer to as Clemente.
Perfect.
And then in October of 1935, they bought the land where the fire would eventually occur and built a 2-story, 8-room house with a full basement. Giannullo agreed to co-sign the loan for the house under the condition that he be made beneficiary of the home insurance, and George agreed. And the amount for the home insurance initially was $1,500.
I'm sensing a clue. Is that a clue?
Hint, hint.
Okay. Is this George and Jennie? I was trying to show a picture. Okay.
Yes.
So show a picture of George and Jennie. This is in front of the original billboard. Is that right?
This is in front of the second billboard.
Oh, the second billboard. Okay.
Yes,
gotcha.
there were 3 total.
What year was this?
I'm not sure what year that was.
I'm gonna guess. I'm not sure.
60s.
I'm gonna guess 60s. But yeah. All right,
And
carry
then,
on.
Sometime in 1943, George decided to part ways with Giannullo, and he bought the Dempsey Transfer Company and ended up changing the name to the Sodder Trucking Company, and ran it with the help of his 2 oldest sons, John and Joe, and Jennie was in charge of handling the books. It is rumored that Giannullo was not very happy with this decision.
And that's your great-great-grandpappy? Or great-grandpappy?
Great.
Well, Joe
was my great-grandpa.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
And then by 1945, they had 10 children. So they added Jennie, Betty, and Sylvia.
What was the age range between?
I believe John was Dang, I should have looked at this. 22, I believe.
Okay.
And Sylvia, the youngest, was 4.
That was in 1945.
In 1945, yes.
Out of 10 kids, so 4 and 22
Mhm.
is the range.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And I mean, like they were Italian, right? But,
Yes, they were Italian. Yes.
I mean, that's very so. Like my grandmother is Italian. She is the baker's dozen. She's one of 13.
Manja.
Yeah, so it was very common.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what else you going to do? Let's be honest. There's no phones.
Yeah.
You're going to read and have babies. I mean, that's pretty much all you're going to do. Carry on. And own trucking companies. My
Mhm.
man's an entrepreneur. I'm liking this growth.
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to get into the fire. So around 60 days before the fire, Janulo sent his friend and insurance salesman, golly, Rosser Long, to the Sodder residence to try to convince George to raise the insurance currently on the house and also to take out life insurance on every member of his family. But George declined. I will go ahead and tell you, after the fire, it was learned that Janulo raised the house insurance anyways without telling George from 1,500 to 1,750, and it was paid out to Janulo after the fire.
After the fire. He raised it after the fire?
He raised it before the fire.
Before the fire.
But then it was
Okay.
paid out after the fire.
I was going to say, what kind of
Yeah.
requirements they have?
But
You can
he didn't tell George that he raised it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's odd.
And okay, so Janulo then visited them and stated, there is a cuss word in this, but I'm not saying the cuss word part.
I can beep it. Or do we?
No, I'll just say the other way to say it. So he stated, "I see you have refused to take out insurance and refused to sign the papers to settle Mrs. Sodder's father's estate. Your gosh dang house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed, and you're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini."
Hold on. Who said this?
Janulo.
Yeah,
When-
we can't. Yeah, now blasphemy, that's a whole new level. We didn't know it was blaspheming, but okay, that's on record.
Yes. it's on
When did
record.
he say this?
He said it, not exactly sure, but he showed up to do the insurance around 60 days before the fire. So shortly after that, Janulo visited them and said this. And it is true that George was not a fan of Mussolini. He was very outspoken about it, and he even stated that he would not raise sons for him.
Can y'all, whoever can take this, Mussolini, why is that significant in history? What did he do? Didn't he get killed by citizens? Didn't he get, like, I don't know, something happened? Y'all went to college. Y'all gotta explain here. Josie's gonna look that up.
Dictator. I can tell you that. Yeah, an Italian dictator. At the point of the fire, I don't remember if he was already passed, but he wasn't in power at the time of the.
He died a
Fire.
couple months before.
Okay,
the
yeah,
fire.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
Mussolini did?
yeah, Mussolini did. Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't he killed by citizens? Wasn't he like executed or something like that? Man, this is terrible that I'm Jozy will look it up. All right. I just want to give context here, because is there potential mob ties, or is that jumping ahead too much? Like,
Jumping ahead, I'll get into it.
okay, gotcha. Perfect. Carry on. So, well, and I want to clarify, how is this on record? Is this, who said that he said this? Is that kind of he said, she said type stuff?
It is. They literally put it in one of the fire marshal reports.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And go ahead and guess, guys. You think he was ever questioned?
I'm going to say probably not. I mean, you might as well just put your fingers in your ears and be like, I don't know.
Did he live local though? Like, did he live far from?
No. He was a Fayetteville businessman.
So did he know the other parties involved, like the fire chief and?
I'll get into that too.
Some of that small town.
Him and his cousin were pretty big in the town at the time. His cousin was a stonemason, and a lot of the buildings in Fayetteville he built. And they owned a lot of buildings then too.
I wonder if he worked on the wall in Welch. There's Italian
might have.
stonemason wall all through Welch, and it is so gorgeous.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but he might have.
Man, that's cool. Okay.
Okay. And then sometime after the threat made by Janulo, but before the fire, a man came to the Sodder residence and asked George if he needed any work done. We don't know who this man was, but it's believed that George did know who it was. And after George said no, the man walked around to the back of the house, pointed at the 2 separate fuse boxes, and said, "That's going to start a fire someday." And George was like, "Well, we have an electric stove and we have to have an extra fuse box for it. And those were literally just installed. Like, they're brand new." Mm-hmm. And the electrician like cleared it and said everything was good. Mm-hmm. And then the man left. And for about a week leading up to the fire, the Sodders report an automobile being parked across the street with a man inside that watched the house and watched the children getting off the bus. The day of the fire, George, John, and Ted were busy making deliveries, and Marion, who is the oldest daughter, she was working a shift at a local store. Marion arrived home with gifts for her younger siblings, and around 10:30, Jenny announced that it was time for bed, but Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty had asked to stay up to play with their toys and listen to the radio. Marion had already fallen asleep on the couch, which was a regular occurrence for her. She preferred to sleep on the couch, which I get.
A lot of people do. Yeah.
And Jenny agreed to let them stay up as long as they completed their chores before they went to bed, which included they had chickens, so they had to go outside and put the chickens up. And they might have had other animals too that they had to take care of. And then they had to close the blinds, lock the doors, and turn all the lights off. And so George, Jenny, Sylvia, John, and Ted were all in bed by 11.
And there were, 2 bedrooms that they all shared upstairs?
Yes, 2 bedrooms that they shared upstairs. Yeah.
That's probably why she wanted to sleep on the couch, because...
I put the outline of the house in that Google Drive.
Okay, I'm trying to find this Google Drive, and I don't see where it is. Let me log back in.
I added you to it. It just says Creepalachia.
Oh, does it say... It just says Creepalachia on
yeah.
it? Okay, let me make sure that I actually opened it and didn't miss it, but you can keep going. I'll
look. So 11 o'clock is the last time that a member of the Sodder family saw any of the 5 children that would go missing. So at around 12:30 a.m., Jenny was woken up by a phone call. When she answered, she could hear laughing and talking in the background, and a woman asked her for someone that she didn't know. Jenny informed them that they had the wrong number, and they hung up.
I got the drive now, Miranda.
Okay.
Which one?
Floor plan.
Floor plan.
Yes, so that's the floor plan of the house.
Gotcha. Okay, I got it up.
Yes.
And it was 2 stories. This is the top.
Yes. So like 1.5 technically, because I don't think the top was like a full story.
They have a basement too, though?
Yeah, they had a basement
too.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And where did this drawing come from?
From a family member.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay, so they mapped it out so you could kind of visualize.
Yeah, I think one of the Sodder children drew this, and then Jenny, the cousin, or the granddaughter, found it and then ended up retracing it.
Perfect.
So the 5 children who were believed to have died in the fire, they were upstairs in the girls' and boys' room. Is that correct?
No.
One was at the couch.
They would have. It is not known that they went upstairs.
Okay.
Yes. The last time anybody saw them, they were all downstairs.
Gotcha.
And
like Josie's saying, there wasn't anyone that thought like, okay, well, they're going to bed. Like they walked up and went to bed.
Yeah. Everybody else had already gone to bed. They stayed up late.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
With you.
They would have been in the living room.
Yes, they would have been in the living room, right next to
the front porch.
Yes, and there's also, which I didn't know until I started looking at this, that there's a front door and a back door.
Okay, so they had easy access to walk out. All right.
Yes. So she for them they had a wrong number, and then she hung up. Before going back to bed, she noticed that all the lights were still on and the doors weren't locked. She just figured that the kids probably forgot, and so she locked the doors and then went back to bed. Shortly before falling asleep, she heard what sounded like something hitting the roof and rolling off. She thought about waking up George, but figured it was just like a tree limb or something, and she went back to sleep.
This is like 1 a.m.
It was 12:30 was when she woke up by the phone call. And I'll go ahead and say that it was later learned that in the time between Jennie going back to sleep and her waking up, a local bus driver was driving past the house and he saw what looked like balls of fire being thrown onto the roof. Around 1 a.m., Jennie woke up to the smell of smoke. She got up to check it out and discovered a fire in the room they used it as their office. So the one in the bottom left-hand corner.
The bottom left-hand corner?
Yes.
Okay.
That is where the fire was first spotted. And that is also where the telephone was. And so the fire was already blocking the telephone at that point.
And where was her room? Or
Her
where
room
was the
is the top left corner.
top left? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
And the fire was spreading rapidly and it was already blocking the telephone, like I said. She immediately yelled for her husband. She ran into the living room and woke up Marion, who ran into her parents' bedroom and grabbed Sylvia and ran out of the house. And then she yelled up the stairs to the kids to wake up. And then she ran outside and tried to put out the fire. John and George heard their mother yelling and immediately jumped out of bed and started down the stairs, and they yelled to their other siblings to wake up. As they were going down the stairs, the fire was spreading so fast that their hair was singed, and they then made it outside to put out the fire. John stated in the police report that the wind was blowing from the southeast corner where the fire was first spotted, which is the bottom where the office is. So I'm going to go ahead and address something that everybody always brings up every time anybody talks about this. And it's in the first police report taken that day by the state police. John apparently told them that he shook the kids awake, but he later denies this. And he also told different newspapers that day that he and George only yelled to the kids. And, and they also explained that, in that moment, they had no clue how serious the fire was. They just thought that they were going to go downstairs, put it out quickly, and go back to bed, honestly.
So John and George were in the boys'
room. Yes.
And so where were they yelling to? Do they think everyone else was in the girls' room? Like, where did they think all the other
I think
kids
that
were?
they just jumped up quickly and because the stairs were so close.
Right.
I think they just jumped up quickly and ran downstairs and were just yelling as they.
Okay.
Because, like I said, they didn't think the fire was serious. They just thought that they had to go downstairs and help put it out.
So they didn't have an idea of where the other.
No. And they don't remember seeing the kids either. But also, I don't put a lot into him saying that just because, one thing I've learned from true crime is that you never know how you're going to react to a situation. And we don't know, what was going through his head at that point. We don't know how the police were questioning him, and also important to remember, he just returned from the military where he was in charge of people. And I'm sure that, when he heard his mom yelling, his instincts just kicked in and he just jumped up and ran down the stairs. And that's everybody brings it up. Oh, well, but John said he shook the kids awake. But, I don't put any thought into that really.
Was that in the newspaper?
No, it was in the official police report.
Okay.
He told the newspapers that day, him and George both told the newspapers that day that they only called to the kids.
Okay. And people, we can't get it right today and we have Google. So reporters, I'm sure, weren't perfect back in the day. No offense, Jozy.
But
yeah,
they're going by notes and not really recorders.
Yeah, no recordings. Man, wouldn't that be amazing if you had recordings?
Oh yeah.
But anyway, all right.
But also, it is mentioned in the initial police report, but then they never bring it up again. They never mention it in any other report. They only mention it in the police report. And so once the family was outside, they realized that Maurice, who was 14, Martha, who was 12, Louis, who was 9, Jennie, who was 8, and Betty, who was 5, were missing, and they assumed that they were trapped upstairs. So they tried starting their trucks in order to back them up to the house and climb up top of them to reach the second story, but they couldn't get it started. It's in some reports it states that they believed that they were messed with, but George admits that he just, in his hurry, he just choked it too hard, which was possible back then with those type of trucks. I'm not a truck expert, but from what I'm told, that was
That sounds
a
right to
common
me.
thing. Yes.
Yeah.
And they all were, yelling for the children, but no one heard them or saw them at any of the windows at any point. George ran outside to the side of the house where a window looking into the landing of the staircase was and tried to break the glass to get upstairs to the kids, but he ended up just cutting his arm really badly. The stairs were already engulfed in flames and it was not safe to enter. He looked for the ladder that was always on the side of the house, but it wasn't there. Later, the ladder was found 70 feet away over an embankment. And Marion ran to the home of their next door neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, to call the fire department, but they were not able to reach the operator. Around 1 a.m., a Mr. Thomas Smith was driving past on his way home from work and saw the fire. He then headed to a beer place known as Crassus Park, operated by Jeff Atkins and Lonnie Johnson, where he tried to call the fire department but was told the phone was out of order. Mr. Smith then drove to Fayetteville and finally succeeded in reaching Fire Chief F.J. Morris, who claimed to have already received a call about it. While it's not 100% known, it is alleged that Mr. Smith had to drive to the chief's house in order to reach him, and that when he arrived, the chief was in the middle of a poker game. Allegedly. Mr. Smith states that the fire chief responded, "We know about it," and when asked if he would go to the fire, he stated he didn't know. Mr. Smith then informed him that children were trapped and burning, and Morris gave no response. Mr. Smith then returned to the scene of the fire to find that the house was destroyed. He went home and he went back around 8 a.m., which is about the same time that the fire department showed up. After the visit from Mr. Smith, Lonnie Johnson, the owner of the bar that Mr. Smith stopped at, his business partner, Jeff Atkins, and guest name Peggy Price, Virginia Buckland, Everett Buckland, Lester Cook, and an unnamed taxi driver drove to the scene of the fire. They stated to officials that they did not see any children appear at any windows at any point. And it was later learned that the phone call came from one of the women at the bar. And the woman just claimed that it was a wrong number. The family remembers that the Christmas lights inside the house were still on even while the fire was burning. And the Sodders were forced to wait inside the cab of the truck in order to escape because it was super duper cold that night while waiting on the fire department to arrive. According to newspapers published days after the fire department arrived around 9 a.m., but later F.J. Morris claims that they arrived around 8 a.m. So it's not for sure.
But it was several hours.
It's several hours, yes. Regardless, by that time, the house had been reduced to ashes, and the family reports that the house burned for a total of 30 to 45 minutes. When the fire chief arrived, he stated that the basement was a glowing bed of embers. He and his men then laid a line of hose to a stream some distance away to cool the embers down so they could search. And searchers of the debris were F.J. Morris, John Sodder, Manuel Moles, Bill Bickford, Jimmy Arthur, Ted Sodder, Arthur Moles, Carl Bragg, and Garnet Arthur. Left in the ruins of the house was a stove, charred utensils, fruit jars, bed springs, toys, and allegedly 2 steel drums. George insists that if the drums were there, they were empty, but officials later try to claim otherwise. And also found were some damaged and undamaged coins and part of a book. Around 10 a.m., Chief Morris informed the Sodders that the ruins had been searched, quote, as if with a fine-tooth comb, unquote, but no remains of the children were found. He suggested that the Sodders grab a handful of dirt, place it in a box, and then bury it and hold a funeral. In 1948, though, Chief Morris admits to a newspaper that he actually didn't do a thorough search. He just searched where the beds would have been and only stopped because George ordered him to, which isn't true. And this is only, one example of officials changing their statements and trying to blame George and Jennie for the inadequate search that day.
How do we know it's not true? Is that what they said? Or is it a lot of hearsay when it comes to this?
Well, yeah, they like to claim that George said one thing, but George is always like, no, that's not true. I didn't say that.
And he even has on his gravestone the statement, which I don't know if you have it written down, but talking about how they didn't ever get justice when it comes to this case. But yeah, all right, carry on. And out of curiosity, I went ahead and Googled. I'm like, well, what's the temperature to cremate a body? And it's between 1,400 and 2,000 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did look up a typical house fire, and it could be anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 degrees, it said.
But they say typically, like even with cremation, like
there's always remains found. Yeah, I'll talk about that later.
Bones are typically left over, even with cremations.
Yep.
So.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
That.
Yes.
And like before you get too far ahead, I found, so like I'm sure you have more information about this, but I found it interesting. If you go back to like the newspaper archives, January 20th, 1946. So less than a month. It's the third one. Yeah. So if you go down to, right above the ad, it says charged with theft. Can you see it? On the left, on the right side.
Let me zoom in here.
Yeah.
So I'll get to this. Yeah.
Which one?
You were doing a timeline. So I was like, it just like, I'm sure you have more info, but like, this is all I saw. So it says the bottom right above
right
where
there,
it says it's
where
grilled.
Your cursor is.
Yeah. It says charged with theft. Lawmen Johnson of Fayetteville RFD, which I'm assuming is something fire department.
Sounds right.
Is being held to action of the grand jury on the charge of grand larceny for the theft of a pair of block chains from the George Sodder of Fayetteville, December 25th.
Huh.
So this person is charged with stealing block chains, which I don't really know what those are.
I'll get into that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this is interesting to know, though.
So the night of the fire, there's a theft.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let me look up what RFD means so we get this right.
I couldn't find it.
RFD meaning.
Do you know what that means?
No, I don't. I only looked at that briefly, but yeah, I don't know what RFD
means. Says Fayetteville RFD, but
Fayetteville. All right, I'll look it up while you're talking, Miranda.
Okay, yeah. So back to how he changed his statement. It's also important to point out that depending on exactly when they showed up, if they stopped searching at 10 a.m., that gave them like a max of 2 hours to search the ruins, minus, however long it took to cool down the embers. And that's like not nearly enough time for an adequate search. And different newspapers in the days report that all scrap iron and other debris was to be removed before the basement was to be filled in, but it's unknown whether that happened or if it did, when that happened. Fayette County prosecuting attorney Carl Vickers was informed by Chief Morris that no remains were found, so he decided to hold a coroner's inquest back at the site. Back then, inquests were normally held at the scene of a crime if the conclusions seemed to be obvious. The coroner's inquest consisted of 6 members, 5 of which have personal ties to Genulo.
Ooh, no way. RFD is Rural Fire Department.
Okay, that's what I was going to guess.
Yeah.
Okay. The members were his cousin and business partner, Cliente Genulo, who was the foreman of the jury, Fire Chief F.J. Morris, who was a friend and bookkeeper for Genulo, Floyd C. Shuck, who was a bank bookkeeper for Genulo, J.D. Schultz, who was a member of several different clubs with the Genulos and other members, as well as president of Cliente Genulo's company, Fayetteville Savings and Loan, County Clerk Lacey Neely, and Jackson Theodore Jennings, who was an employee of George Sodder. The jury quickly returned the verdict that the children had perished in the fire due to smoke suffocation and that the fire was accidental.
So they paneled a jury to determine the cause of the fire, essentially?
Yes, a coroner's inquest and a coroner's jury. It's the same thing. Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing now.
I don't know if it is or not, but back then it was. It was mainly for if it was something obvious, to come to the conclusion quickly, I believe.
Bitcoin screwed up blockchain. All I'm seeing is freaking crypto.
It's okay. I have more explanation.
Okay, perfect.
So a second inquest was held on December 26th, where Cliente Genulo reported that, quote, no parts of the 5 missing children were found in the debris of the fire, end quote. The verdict of accidental fire was based on the allegation that large quantities of oil, gas, and coal were kept in the basement, but George insisted that none of that was true. Like they worked on trucks in the basement, but they didn't keep like anything like that. The only thing at the time of the fire that was in the basement were 1 or 2 truck motors that they had been working on. Prosecuting attorney Vickers was quoted as saying to a local newspaper that was published on December 26, 1945, that there was nothing left to investigate. It was complete destruction, and the jury rendered, I think, the only possible verdict under the circumstances. He told another newspaper, so complete was the destruction that any investigation as to the cause was impossible, and the only deduction which could be made is that the fire was caused by a short circuit. Which is incredibly suspicious that he can both claim that it was impossible, but also say this is the cause of the fire in the same sentence. You know what I mean?
Within
Hours.
Yeah.
Hours, yes. So a book that was written about the case called No Direct Evidence by Bob Lane Bragg. He brought up a good point in his book that I want to bring up about the accidental fire verdict. So Trooper Springer, a member of the state police that was present at the fire that day, was quoted in a newspaper on December 26, 1945 as saying, "The fire apparently began in the basement and was due to defective wiring. It spread rapidly to all sections of the structure." In order for this to be in the newspaper that day, the reporter would have had to speak to the trooper the day of the fire. This means that the trooper has made his assessment of the scene and had made a determination of the cause that same morning. The trooper had to have made his determination before speaking to the Sodders or interviewing anyone. He must have also known that there had been no remains found. Why this raised no suspicions in regard to a possible cause of the fire is unclear. Trooper Springer later changed the determination of the start of the fire and said it probably started on the roof.
Okay, say that again.
Say all of it again?
No, okay, so you said the trooper was quoted in the newspaper on December 26th.
Yes.
Saying
the fire apparently began in the basement and was due to defective wiring. It spread rapidly to all sections of the structure.
Okay.
And then he changed it later to say that it probably started on the roof instead.
How does a fire start on the roof, first off? Lightning?
Well, I did mention that bus driver saw balls of fire being thrown.
Okay. Yeah.
onto the
Okay.
roof.
Molotov cocktails we're talking.
Do you know which paper it was? I'm assuming it's like either... I can't find anything from the like if there was a Fayetteville paper.
Mm-hmm.
I know like
I don't have it exactly in here, but I could tell you later.
I'm assuming it's one of the 2 Beckley papers.
Well, I have more papers than that. There's more papers that are not on Newspaper Archive that I was able to find.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, because most of the ones on Newspaper Archive that I've seen were either one of the 2 Beckley papers, the Gazette, and then the Bluefield reposted some stuff. But yeah. Okay.
And then and it's important to note that the Department of Public Safety report was not published until 3 weeks after, on January 21st, 1946, but the trooper's opinion on what happened didn't change. And they also did not interview the Sodders any further after December 25th, and they didn't interview any of the dozens of witnesses that had shown up in the hours after the fire had been set. They only interviewed George, Jennie, and John that day. And
no one else.
No one else.
And think about that. 5 children burn in a house fire. Today, if that happened...
Well, the kids were, young, right? The other children.
14 to 5.
Well, I'm just saying, like the police now, if 5 kids die in a house fire, they're going to be working on this for years. You know what I mean?
Well, there was it in Fayetteville or there was a house fire that several children died in recently, but was the mother killed them.
Oh, that was Greenbrier County.
Yeah. I know, I reported on that.
Well, that's sad.
That was a big,
Well, they figured that out pretty quick, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they did find all the bodies of those kids in that fire.
How many kids?
5?
There was several.
Yeah, I think it was 5.
What?
That case is very tragic. Yes.
Thanks, Jozy.
Sorry.
The Sodders later report that on the day of the fire, an unnamed neighbor couple visited the scene of the fire and told George and Jennie that it was God's will that their house had burned down. Jennie told them that the fire had been set by someone, and the couple suddenly turned at once and left as if they had been accused. And like you said earlier, John Sodder also told the police and the newspaper that day that they believed the fire was intentionally set. And it's believed that George and Jennie remained at the scene until the majority of the search had been done. But at some point, George was like forced to go to the hospital because of how bad the gash on his arm was from breaking the window. And he also was just inconsolable,
Oh, yeah.
which, of course. And once he was released, he was placed on bed rest due to shock. And at some point, Jennie took the remaining children, minus John, to a family member's house in Smithers. And it's believed that John is the one that stayed behind until officials decided to leave the scene.
It's a good picture of George.
Yes.
Yeah. He looks about 55, 60 years old here.
I'm not sure exactly how old he is in that picture, but yeah.
Man.
And the basement was filled in on December 29th, 1945, by Jennie's brother, Jimmy Cipriani, using fill dirt and a bulldozer. And the reason George decided to fill in the basement was because he didn't want what he believed to be his children's final resting place to be trampled on. And then the basement was turned into a memorial garden for the kids. On December 30th, 1945, despite no remains being found, death certificates were made for the children, citing the cause of death as smoke suffocation. And that's, you can see the little gravestones kind of that they made for them.
Okay, I got a picture of these.
Yes, those are, little gravestones for them.
So was this the basement where they filled in?
Yes.
And put on top?
Yes.
And now it's a residential neighborhood?
No, there's just a house there.
Oh, there's a house. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Don't go there, people.
So there's a house now built on the side of...
Yeah, it's in a different part where from where that was, but where that is, they paved over it. It's a driveway now.
There's no more memorial?
No.
Man.
No, the family doesn't own the property anymore. So
how long ago did they, I guess, sell or lose the property?
1989, whenever Jennie passed away.
Mm.
And later, when it became time to restore phone service to the new house that they had built, the Sodders were informed that the phone line had been cut 14 feet in the air and 2 feet away from the pole, meaning a ladder would have been needed to reach it. And the Sodders were told that the fire had been electrical in origin, and the lights would not have been on while the fire was burning. And now I'm getting to the chain blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, either prior to or after the fire had been set, Lonnie Johnson and Jeff Atkins entered the Sodder barn, stole a pair of chain hoists, and threw them over an embankment to retrieve later. And so stealing these chain hoists would not have been an easy task because they were connected to the ceiling.
What is that?
So
chain
they're like,
hoist. Let me look at
so they're like used to like lift like trucks and stuff.
Pick up a motor.
Yeah, so like pick up a motor. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. To raise stuff.
So somebody stole that while the fire was taking place.
Yes, somebody, one of the witnesses saw them go in the barn and take it.
Which would be a pretty expensive item, so maybe they threw it over the hill to go pick it up later.
They did, yes, yeah.
Okay.
And it would take a fair amount of time and assistance to remove them.
And they have the name. So it was what?
Lonnie Johnson and Jeff Atkins.
Yeah. How were they connected again to everyone?
Fire department.
No, I'm not sure. I've never.
Or there's 5 out of 6 that are connected to the genitals.
Yeah, no. Lonnie Johnson and Jeff Atkins were the bar owners. That Mr. Smith went to that bar, and then they learned about the fire from Mr. Smith, and then they drove to the scene of the fire.
Okay.
So maybe Lonnie was a member of the fire department too.
I mean, a lot of people.
RFD.
I'm not sure. I've never seen that anywhere else other than that one that you showed.
I mean, it would be very typical. It'd be like the volunteer fire department. It could be very typical that like local people who, if a lot of people were off during the war, that whoever's remaining, would be the members of the
it makes sense that they would. It makes sense that they would do that. They go to the bar and be like, "Hey, Lonnie."
Yeah.
It's interesting that they identify him not as a local bar owner, but as a member of the fire department.
Yeah.
And so once George found out after the fire, he put out a warrant for the men's arrest. And Jeff Atkins immediately enrolled in the Army, despite the fact that the war was over and he was gone for 2 years. And he was never charged or questioned about this at all. And then Johnson was ordered to appear in court, but never did, and was eventually fined $25, and nothing else was done. Lonnie Johnson also told the coroner's inquest that he was the one that cut the phone lines because, quote, he thought it was the power line and he thought cutting the power line would stop the fire, unquote. Does that make any sense?
Lonnie said that?
Yes.
So
8 hours later?
But I'm assuming he was saying that when he went to the fire after they came to the bar, when Lawmen came, that he cut the power line, which was the phone line at the time.
But the phone line was already cut pre-fire. We think. We don't know.
It's believed, but it would have been impossible for him to, because it was 14 feet in the air, 2 feet away from the pole, and the ladder was missing. And also nobody was like, hey, yeah, we saw Lonnie Johnson climb that pole while the fire happened, you know?
Could he have taken the ladder though?
I mean, he's going holler on some stuff. He may have stole a few more things.
But could that have been like, could he have seen the ladder?
Well, but the ladder was missing before Lonnie Johnson ever showed up.
It was missing when the father
went out there. Yeah, okay. Before anybody showed up at all, the ladder was already discovered to be missing. Well, so the ladder had to go missing, and the phone line had to have been cut before the fire happened.
So that's probably what they did. They took the ladder, cut the phone line, and then they hauled out of there, took the ladder with them.
Yeah, they threw the ladder 70 feet away over an embankment. So
so the ladder was over.
So it was later found.
But you're saying that Lawmen admitted to cutting.
Yes, but then in the report they admit, they're like, but this isn't possible because he wouldn't have been able to get up there. But they never looked into it further. They were just like, okay, he admitted to cutting it.
When was that report issued?
1950 is the first fire marshal report. And
over 5 years later.
It's interesting, like when you go back and look, like there was a lot of interest at the time when the fire happened, obviously, because it's 5 kids, varying ages, some very young, that like obviously shook the community. That was very tragic. And so a lot of activity right when it happens. And then like I said, like I don't have all the newspapers online, but like for like 2 years, there's really not much activity. There's a mention during the anniversary that some wreaths were like laid at their grave sites. But then I think it's like 2 years before the family really starts to come back and say like, no, like this didn't just happen. Like
it was before 2 years, but I'll get into that.
Yeah.
But so it's really strange though, how like all that, activity, all that strangeness, why did this happen? Why did that happen? But then like nothing.
Oh, it's bananas.
Yeah.
So up until Jennie died, she rarely left the house after this and only wore black from that day forward, which is why I'm wearing black.
Shout out.
And every single piece of clothing that she owned in her closet was black. But her granddaughter Jennie did tell me that her favorite color was pink, and she could often be seen wearing a pink apron. So the officials in Fayetteville eventually try to paint this narrative that George and Jennie fully believe their children died in the fire and only believe their kids had been kidnapped after being contacted by private detectives a few years later. But the truth is they started to suspect something wasn't right, like fairly quickly. I don't have like an exact time, but like if not within 6 months, then within the next year. And because, you got to understand how much they had to go through in the immediate aftermath of the fire. Like, they were not only grieving their children, but they had to continue caring for the remaining children while also running their business and also having to piece their lives back together and, get a new house. They had to get new clothes, new furniture. Like they just basically had to rebuild their lives. And, fortunately, the people of Fayetteville were a big help. Like, someone built a small house for them to stay in until they could build a new one. Clothing and food was donated. And John was reimbursed for a military check that had been burned up in the fire.
Oh, wow.
So they, the town really did come together and help them. But eventually the Sodders started piecing together the weird occurrences before and after the fire and came to realize how suspicious it all was. The damaged and undamaged coins that were found, along with part of a book, were a big reason that Jennie started to suspect that they couldn't have died in the fire. The Sodders remembered that about 3 days after the fire, 3 men and a woman came to them and asked to see their babies, as if to learn if the parents suspected anything. Around 3 months after the fire, their youngest daughter, Sylvia, found a hard rubber object that was military green, hollow, possibly made of plastic or rubber, and had a twist-off cap in the yard that U.S. Army authorities identified as a incendiary device. And according to the 1952 fire marshal report, Jennie told them that about 2 months after the fire, she was walking her children to the bus stop when a neighbor woman told her she was afraid of her children being kidnapped. But of course, when officials went to interview this neighbor, she denied ever saying this, which is a common theme that you will notice.
Oh, yeah.
So sometime in 1946, Jennie decided to start conducting her own experiments to see if 5 children really could be disintegrated in a house fire. She didn't want to worry George, so she chose to conduct these experiments while he was at work. And so she would take animal bones and different types of accelerant and like various methods, and she just tried her hardest to get the bones to disintegrate. Like she would leave them in the coal stove like all day and just keep throwing more coal in there, more coal in there, more coal in there, and like she couldn't get them to disintegrate. And then she would go outside and like, I don't have like a detail of everything that she did because, you know, she didn't write it down. But she would use like different accelerants and different methods, and like she tried everything possible in order to get these bones to disintegrate, and she couldn't.
Is this what, like, Jeannie, the granddaughter? Jennie. Sorry.
Oh, Jennie, yes.
Jennie.
Yeah, she
the
told
granddaughter told you?
Yes.
Does she remember, like, hearing this, or, like...
Jennie told her herself, yeah.
Told her herself?
Yeah. And sometime in 1946, they saw a picture of a little girl in New York, and they believed it to be Betty. George decided to drive all the way to New York to see if it was her, but was denied any access or information. There are, I don't have a picture of it.
Okay, gotcha. Betty Sodder, I see.
Yeah, that's that's the Billboard picture. Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So there are a couple photos floating around the internet that people claim are the magazine photo, but they aren't. I tried to track the picture down, but I wasn't able to because it's not known exactly what magazine it was seen in. It is known that the magazine picture was seen sometime in 1946 because of a letter written by Miranda Sodder on January 27th, 1947. She wrote to a Mrs. Kruger who worked at Walt Whitman School in New York. But it's unknown whether the school was mentioned in the magazine or if they were able to find out in a different way. She references a specific edition of Look magazine, but Jennie, the granddaughter, tells me that they were not sure if that was the correct edition or not. And I even tracked down that exact magazine and bought it. And it didn't mention Walt Whitman School, and it did not have a picture resembling Betty. And they never received a reply back to that letter, which is why George decided to go up there. And these occurrences, combined with suspicious activity surrounding the fire, made them certain that their kids were not dead. Sometime in 1947, they decided to hire a private detective named Oscar Tinsley from Golly Bridge to help them look into the possibility of kidnapping. George had also been thinking of re-excavating the ruins of the house to search again for remains, and was beginning to arrange for equipment to use.
When was this in 47? You said?
Yes, sometime. Yeah, a lot of the stuff I don't have an exact date for. It's just like
era. Yeah, sure.
And so in a newspaper dated November 14th, 1948, the Sodders gave these reasons for believing their children had been kidnapped. So number one,
actually, if you want to pull it up,
yep.
It's
oh, you have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Third line, the second one, it's the Charleston Gazette.
November 14th, 1948.
It's very, very detailed.
Yes.
But it breaks down. It's really hard to it's obviously like the layout is very, very different from how you'd see newspapers today.
Yes.
But all the headlines, it does have like different reasons for why. So obviously those are the 5 kids, but then,
oh, wow. This is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, cool.
Yeah.
No, it is. It is.
I'm sorry.
But I think the investigator, it says he was part of the American Detectives Agency.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
From Golly Bridge. Yeah.
And for those listening, there's different sections in this article. It's full front page, and it has it has headings that say bodies not found, and it goes through an explanation. Solutions suggested, wall scaling fails, evidence lacking, different things like that.
I think so. They later kind of summarize this in articles that talk about this case, and they have, I think it's 8 reasons. So the first one was there was no actual evidence of that the bodies were found. 2 is that there are no outcries from the children. 3 is that no one smelled burning flesh. 4, a ladder which could have been used to reach the children in the upstairs room was misplaced. 5, a sound was heard on the roof before the fire occurred. 6, a mysterious telephone call was received before the fire took place. 7, the telephone wires later were believed to have been cut. And then 8, a number of other circumstances including observations of the children by a man in a parked automobile on the days that they were going to school. So that's an overview, but obviously this is a very, very detailed story. It goes into kind of the reasons why an investigator was like, this is not just your average
thousands of words, thousands upon thousands.
This is a really good story.
Sweaty, Miranda. Keep going.
Okay. So that's the fire. That's what happened leading up to around 1947. So sometime in 1947, local Reverend James F. Frame heard that Chief Morris was telling people around town that he had found what he described as a human heart in the ashes. Morris allegedly told Frame that he had buried the heart in a wooden box, and Reverend Frame told him that the human heart would resist fire. Reverend Frame then contacted the Sodders and told them told them what the chief said. Jennie called Fire Chief Morris and asked him to come show them where he had buried the heart, and he did not appear for some time. And I do want to add that I found in a newspaper that the January of 1947, Fire Chief Morris handed in his resignation for unknown reasons, but the council was like, no, you're not resigning. And so they
he's like, hey y'all, I'm crazy.
So they convinced him to stay on. He did resign sometime in 1948 though, but it's not known exactly when, and it's not known why. When Jennie reached out again, he told her that he had visited the scene and placed a stake where the heart was buried, but the Sodders knew that hadn't been true because the new Sodder home was only 150 feet away from the scene of the fire. So they would have been able to see, one, if he went out there, and 2, there wasn't a stake in the ground anywhere. While it is unknown exactly how many times they had to contact Chief Morris, he eventually agreed to visit the site and show them where he had buried the box. When asked why he didn't tell them about the heart on the day of the fire, he responded, "I thought I told you, maybe I didn't." I should also mention that he never told anyone present at the scene, and he never told anyone during the coroner's inquest that he was a member of as well. And where this heart came from is unknown.
Did they actually find, like he said he took them to the place eventually?
Yes.
So did they find anything there?
Yes, I'm about to get to that. Okay. Yeah. Listen, I got it all.
This is good.
So he claims he found the mask sometime in the evening of December 25th, 1945, and placed it on a shelf in the Sodders' garage. The same day, or possibly the next, between 4 and 5 p.m., he grabbed a box from the scene, wrapped the liver in brown paper, and placed it in the box and nailed the lid shut. He said it was like a cigar box, but George stated that no such box was ever at his house. The fire chief was later reported as saying that he buried the liver, hoping that finding any remains would set the minds of the Sodders at rest and stop the investigation. But if that's true, it doesn't make any sense, because if they died in the fire, why would their remains be in a box?
Why would he want to stop the investigation?
Also, how could a heart not burn?
Like, oh, hey, just so you know, I found your kid's liver and put it in a box. So, you can stop annoying people now.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? This is stranger than fiction.
Detective Tinsley met with Chief Morris in July 1947 at the site of the old house to find the mass. Morris pointed to a spot, and they dug a hole about 6 feet by 6 feet deep and found an old cigar box containing what looked to be some type of internal organ. No one from the fire marshal's office or anyone from law enforcement was present during this digging.
Oh, okay.
Once the box was found, Chief Morris demanded a receipt for some reason. Morris was also asked if this was the only object resembling remains that was found that day, and he said it was. So George and Detective Tinsley then took the mass to the Gay Funeral Home, Gaye Funeral Home, in Montgomery, because they did not trust anyone in Fayetteville. But little did they know that this funeral home was also owned by C.I. Dodd, who owned the funeral home in Fayetteville.
Manja.
George and Detective Tinsley gave the box to the owner, Harold Gay, but did not tell him what was in it or the circumstances surrounding it. Mr. Gay opened the box in front of the men and was able to determine that it was definitely a portion of an animal beef liver, which had never been exposed to fire, that weighed between 4 and 5 pounds. Mr. Gay also noted the liver showed no signs of decay, despite supposedly being buried over a year earlier. Detective Tinsley asked Mr. Gay if he could store the mass until Tinsley could come get it because he wanted to send it to a friend in Baltimore that worked at a hospital. Mr. Gay informed him they did not have cold storage, but would have his brother bury it in the yard. He preserved the liver with embalming fluid, placed it back in the box, and told his brother to bury it. So Mr. Gay tells a newspaper in 1948 that the mass was buried, but then when he was interviewed in 1950 for the fire marshal report, he tells them that the mass just sat on the back porch for 10 days. When Detective Tinsley called to inform them that he would be by to retrieve it, they moved the box from wherever it was to the back steps, where it is believed that the garbage men grabbed it, believing it was trash. And no one ever saw the mass or the box again.
So there's multiple witnesses that saw this liver in a box.
Mhm.
What?
An animal beef liver
What?
that the fire chief
So what you're telling me is people have always been crazy.
buried.
I mean,
What in the crap?
well, at that point too, like it's not like you can do like
What is that going to prove? Like, here's your liver in a box. Sorry about your luck.
well, you can't like what DNA testing is not.
Yeah,
saying.
exactly.
It's not like you know.
Well, I mean, I guess that's why they did it. It's like, they'll
Yeah.
believe it. It's whatever. Like, hey, by the way, I found an organ. I'm trying to put myself in the thought process of why you do this, other than you're freaking crazy.
So in the book I was talking about, he does mention that this was possibly like a mafia tactic. Like, a sign from
Like Benny Ray,
I'm not
sleep with the
saying
fishes.
the mafia was involved. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that mafia tactics could have possibly been used.
Mhm.
And that, was a type of mafia tactic.
Well, as my extensive knowledge from the Godfather trilogy, they put fishes in a newspaper and then wrap it with a bulletproof vest or something.
We have to think too, like there's no internet, there's no like Google, like how do I hide
Yeah.
how do I not look suspicious? Mafia tactics.
Yeah.
Hide a liver in a box.
Man, that'd be a crazy.
So I'm wondering
I'd
how he would even know.
give this dude Google for like 3 days and then not tell him that it saves the search history. I bet you that'd
organized
be
crime
bananas.
was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
But that's all I'm
I
going to
just
say.
don't. That's crazy. I never heard this. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very nonchalantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So fast forward to 1949. So in a newspaper dated January 31st, 1949, a detective, George Swain, who they also hired, tells them that they have reached the conclusion that they required the services of the Smithsonian Institute to analyze the ruins of the fire.
So this isn't that article. This
No.
is from months later, but it is that same
Now,
George
this is right
Swain
before
is quoted.
yes, this is right before the article I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about. So this would have been 49.
Yeah, this
January
one's 49, and this is like 2 months before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
In that same newspaper, it quotes DC District Fire Marshal R.C. Roberts and First Deputy Fire Marshal R.A. Warfield as agreeing that if the children perished 3 years prior, then their bones should still be among the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Richard M. Rosenberg, District Coroner of Washington, D.C., said, those bones, they're there or they're not. If they're not, then let me know the case. It will be nationwide. It was Dr. Rosenberg that suggested to Swain that the re-examination should be supervised by someone at the Smithsonian Institute. In another newspaper dated March 18th, 1949, it quotes a man named Secretary A. Wetmore. I'm not sure. I don't know Secretary of what. It just says Secretary A. Wetmore. Stated, certainly in a case such as this, where 5 individuals were involved, there should be a quantity of bones remaining despite the effects of the fire. As a matter of fact, it is extremely difficult to consume bones completely, except under conditions comparable to a modern crematorium. We have found that where definite cremation was practiced by peoples lacking the best of modern equipment, complete destruction of the bones never is accomplished. The opinion of men on our staff is that under circumstances such as described for the tragedy near Fayetteville, most of the skeletons should be present in the debris if the children actually were in the house at the time it was burned.
Yeah, 5 bodies. There's
Yes.
no possible way it would have.
Well, she'll probably get to it, but that leads to what happens a couple months later.
Yeah.
A 30-minute fire would not be sufficient to produce extensive obliteration of bone material. And that same newspaper states that the Smithsonian Institute, which frequently cooperates with the FBI in making investigations, has expressed the opinion that the bones should still be at the scene of the tragedy if the children were burned to death.
Which is common sense, kind of. Now, I mean,
would
there's
think.
no way. There's no possible way.
On Thursday, August 18th,
Okay, wait, hold on.
1949
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jozy.
Go to the article.
Do you have this one? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see. Okay.
I
It
found-
should be third row, first one, August 18th.
I have like over 50 newspapers.
Third
and I
row,
can never
first
remember where
one.
I
This
got them
one,
all
Beckley Raleigh Register?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the one the day after. So yeah,
And the one the
Ignore
day
the-
after, too?
well, we will in a second. Ignore the
Okay.
main headline. It says Boy Scouts, but right under on the left, it says father begins search of burned home today for children's bodies,
Got it.
which is what you're, yeah.
Carry on.
On Thursday, August 18th, 1949, around 8 a.m., a new excavation of the remains of the house began.
Mhm.
Private Detective George Swain was able to obtain the help of pathologist Dr. Oscar Hunter, who worked at the Smithsonian Institute. Dr. Hunter graduated from Georgetown University, where he also taught at the time of this excavation. He was also on the staff of doctors' hospitals in Washington, D.C. Dr. Hunter served in the Army for 4 years, and during that time, he worked with the Criminal Investigation Division and helped to excavate and investigate literally thousands of graves of war casualties. Upon arriving and being given
So they know what they're doing.
information on the case, Dr. Hunter stated, quote, "There is a good possibility that all of the bones were not destroyed if the children were victims of the more than 3-year-old fire," end quote. Also present at the second excavation were around 14 diggers, George and Jennie Sodder, detectives George Swain and Oscar Tinsley, and along with 2 of Swain's assistants and Fire Marshal C.A. Raper. None of the Fayette County officials were noted at the scene with the exception of a deputy sheriff who was a bystander. So the search started around 8 a.m. and ended at around 7:30 p.m. They first used mechanical equipment to remove about 3 feet of dirt, and then they used shovels for the remaining 3 feet of dirt. And they had prepared large sieves. Is that how you say it?
Scythes?
Sieves.
Spell it.
To like,
Sieves. I think it's sieves.
yeah, like for like, I mean, like
Like
gold
you're panning
mining.
for gold.
Yeah.
Like you're
Oh,
panning
gotcha.
for gold.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what you say.
That's the best example I can
Yeah.
give.
That's perfect. Yeah, no. I was thinking of Children of the Corn things that's a scythe, though.
That's
All right, go ahead.
But if I remember correctly from like the way that they dug up the basement was officials not involved in like digging up the remains were very critical. They were like, well, you didn't use the right tools, or
The
you
fire
didn't
marshal
do it
was,
the correct
but-
way, or you used too many heavy machinery. You should have like, done it by hand or something. So like I thought that was interesting. Like, this family,
You should have took a liver, put it in a box.
well, the same people who are telling the family your kids died in a fire are then the people that are saying you didn't try to prove that they didn't just die in a fire correctly.
Yeah, this is sketchy.
and the fire marshal will be brought up again later.
Yeah. And if you want to go back to
If you're related to that fire marshal and know the truth, reach out. Creepalachia@gmail.com. What are we doing?
go back to the where it talks about where all the articles are.
Oh, yep.
And it should be the 19th. I think it's on the first row.
First row, we got the...
It was like August, because August
August-
19th.
It'd be 1949.
Yeah.
Okay, August 19th?
Yep.
This one? All right, open link.
So it has a picture of I believe George. Yeah. This is him. It's supposed to be him looking through the
Oh, is that George on the left?
Mhm.
Got it.
It should be, I believe. It's in the,
Got it.
George Sodder. So this is, I guess, detailing the process of them excavating the house.
Yeah, it says
Yes.
below it, George Sodder, father of the 5 children, presumed lost in the fire which destroyed their home near Fayetteville on Christmas Day, 1945, examines the site, or 1945, talking about when it happened, examines the site where several bones were found during yesterday's search of the ruins.
Yep.
Let's break that down.
So, so they prepared large sieves to use to sift through the dirt, but were told by Dr. Hunter, the pathologist, that it would be unnecessary because, quote, they would find large bones if there are any, end quote. Shortly before 3 p.m., some bones were found in 2 different sections of the house. George Sodder also found several pieces of inner tube, roofing, and other flammable material that were not consumed by the flames.
But it even says, like, he's very critical, George is, even though bone fragments are found. I believe if, like, it's...
I'll get into that, too.
Yeah.
What you're
I
talking
think
about.
you can see it. It says that, like...
I'm still not convinced they are dead.
Yeah.
Where's it at?
Right there.
The third
In the middle.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Because it does
just
state later that,
show them
like,
for context. I am still not convinced they are dead. Only 3 or 4 bones, which may or may not be human, were found, even though the men had dug to the very floor of the basement.
mm-hmm. And they do state, like, they're going to send them away for testing. But again, like, a few bones of 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
So he's
Sure.
very critical.
Now, are
obviously,
we
as the
positive
father.
these are bones, or could they be stones? that
No, they are.
resemble-
They are bones.
They are bones.
Mhm.
Oh,
Got
I'm
it.
about to get into it.
Got it. Let's do it.
So in the northeast corner, they found 8 pieces of bone, which Dr. Hunter immediately identified as animal bones. And then in the southeast corner, they found a total of 6 bones. 2 of the bones were determined to be animal bones, but the other 4 were identified as lumbar vertebrae that showed no evidence as being burned. So in Dr. Hunter's report made on August 25th, 1949, he approximated the vertebrae belonged to a 14 to 15-year-old child. But on September 20th, 1949, the bones were re-examined by Dr. Marshal Newman, who also worked at the Smithsonian, and he concluded that they had to have belonged to someone between 16 and 22.
And there's an article with a really interesting quote from August 28th. It's the second row, the 4th one.
1949.
Yeah.
Got it.
It states, I believe it's
Charleston Gazette.
the very, very bottom. It says human bones revealed in Fayette fire ruins.
Okay, let's see. Oh, yep, I see
And I
it.
believe it's a quote from the father that says, the absence of other bones is proof that none of the children was in the fire, said Mr. Sodder. Those 4 bones may have been placed there soon after the fire or at some other time.
Yes.
So he's admitting, yeah, bones were found, but, like, again, 5 children, 4 or 5 bone fragments.
Yeah.
Also, no evidence of burning.
Yes. And okay, so the age was determined due to the transverse recesses being fused,
Yeah.
which happens around 16 or 17 years old.
I was gonna say that.
So it talks,
Yeah.
so this is, again, August 28th, 1949 is this article. And I think it says at the top, the skeleton of a 14 to 15-year-old child is what the bones were from.
Yeah.
That was that's what
4 of the
Dr.
bones.
Hunter initially estimated.
Okay.
But then somebody else, another pathologist at the Smithsonian, re-examined them, and he was able to determine they were 16 to 17 years old.
And that would have been after this article.
Yes.
Mhm.
Got it.
And Dr. Newman concluded that while it was possible, it was not probable that these vertebrae would belong to Maurice, who was 14 and a half at the time of the fire. Both Dr. Hunter and Dr. Newman agreed that these vertebrae had not been exposed to fire and that they had been forcibly removed from a skeleton. And so Dr. Hunter said that he considered the search a very thorough one and was surprised that it revealed such an amazing scarcity of bones. He said it was most unusual that no skulls nor pelvic bones were found in the ashes of the fire that apparently was of insufficient heat and duration to consume them. He also said he was certain that the quality of the soil would not cause decomposition during the time that they would have been underground. The vertebrae was also found in the opposite corner of where the boys slept, which makes it highly improbable that they could belong to one of them. So in the first fire marshal report made in 1950, it states that these bones could not be considered of any significance to the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's believed that these bones were either in the fill dirt used to fill in the basement, or that they were planted by someone.
That's how I was going to say.
That's interesting. However, in between that report and when the house was dug up, and now when the additional report, the case was dropped though.
Yes,
by George Swain. It's interesting that it was dropped right after the house was excavated.
Yes.
So August 1949 is when the house was excavated, but there's an article from
like September he dropped out.
Weeks later.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because he states that yes, this case is curious, but
Jozy, we got people putting
that.
livers in boxes.
I know.
Something nefarious has occurred. It's just according to what exactly that was.
So another one of the Sodder detectives named T.C. Simmons received an anonymous letter claiming that the bones came from a cemetery in Mount Hope.
Grave robbers.
Yes.
Anonymous letter?
So, anonymous letter. Dr. Newman also states in his report, it is very strange that no other bones were found in the allegedly careful excavation of the basement of the house. Since the house was stated to have burned only for half an hour or so, one would expect to find the full skeletons of the 5 children rather than 4 vertebrae. And also, how you said that... oh gosh, I lost it.
While you're doing that, do you have anything about Frank Hill in there? So he's a detective. I just saw this quote I want to read real quick about this was before they re-examined. But in this article we brought up earlier, it says Frank Hill, 22-year-old Charleston detective, has taken over the work, the supervision of George Swain, the supervisions of George Swain, who has been connected with the case for about 3 years. And it says, quote, on the basis of the doctor's report, Hill said, I shall work on the theory that the children perished, but as his report plainly indicates, their remains could be found somewhere other than the site of the fire. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. So that was right then. They were this is not from this fire.
Yes.
So they knew that. I mean, that was obvious.
But yet they still drop the case.
So George Swain dropped the case, but they did still have other detectives working with them.
That's what it says. This guy took it over.
Yeah. So at this point, the only investigation being done was by private detectives.
Hired by the family?
Hired by the family, yeah. Officials in Fayetteville would not work on it.
And I think there's articles too of their fundraising for this. Because you have to think
yes, because they wanted to hire another really well-known pathologist, but it would have cost thousands of dollars, and they didn't have that money.
So there's multiple articles in the paper with the family saying help, please donate. We're still looking into the death or
and it wasn't even George and Jennie that tried to get donations. It was people in Fayetteville that were trying to get donations for them. They didn't really want to have to ask for money. They wanted to be able to do this themselves, but people in Fayetteville did try to donate to them and try to get money for them.
There's no memorial of these kids in Fayetteville? Come on, Fayetteville. I know someone out there's listening that can go to a council meeting and they can say, hey, y'all, we got kind of a dark history in this town. We got to memorialize these kids.
Officially, the case is closed, and it was an accidental fire where they burned up.
You can still do something in memory.
Officially.
You have to admit, though, are they dead?
Now they would be.
Well, now they would be now, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yes.
All right, let's go.
George Sodder found it highly illogical that the bones would have belonged to Maurice for the following reasons. So 1, the boy normally would have been sleeping in the end of the house opposite to the place where the bones were picked up by the searching party. 2, if he were awakened by the flames and tried to escape, he would have had the opportunity to come down the stairway and outside to safety before reaching the other end of the house. And 3, no other remains of the skeleton were nearby, although some larger bones should have been found, especially when the fire was of short duration and was not intense enough to burn to ashes nearby pieces of cloth, wood, inner tube, and the floor directly beneath where the bones were found. And, also remember, a stove was found in the ruins like that day. So how could a fire be so hot to destroy 5 skeletons, but still leave behind pieces of cloth and a stove?
Was it a General Electric?
Build them differently back
I don't know. Those things, like, literally probably weighed like 4,000 pounds back then. But, I mean, which makes it even more no, that actually makes sense that why it wouldn't be there if it got super hot. Anyway, I digress. Bottom line, they did not disintegrate 5 bodies.
Yes.
Come on.
So on September 9th, 1949, Detective George Swain announced his retirement from the case due to human bones being found. He is quoted as saying, quote, "My 3 years' work on this mystery leaves the matter unsolved in spite of the fact I worked diligently in probing every known lead in the face of utter frustration met at every turn. Many mysterious circumstances will puzzle me forever. My efforts, in a large measure, were prompted by sympathy for the bereaved parents, and I regret that I was unable to bring them even a crumb of solace in the bereavement." And the Sodders then went on to hire a Mr. Troy Simmons, who was president of the West Virginia Merchant Police.
Nice. And, give George the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he did do all he could. I don't know. I'm sure we'll get into that.
They did.
Yeah.
Did.
So yeah, I mean, it's just, now granted, I don't understand. It's like, oh, we found the bones, I'm done. But I mean, you spend so many years on a case, it has to be exhausting.
George Swain wasn't a detective for very long. I tried looking through the newspapers trying to find him in other cases. And after this, it's like he was not a detective anymore. Yeah, and I couldn't even find anything before that either. So,
He may not have liked it. He's like, man, you know what? This sucks.
I'm wondering, what? So we're at September 1949, right? In November, there was an article saying there could be arrests. Do you have that?
Yeah,
I was trying to there was very few details.
Yeah, I didn't get into that just because there wasn't much. That's all that it was. Just that newspaper article. We don't know who he wanted to arrest. We don't know who the suspects were. So I just didn't get into it.
It was, did you say November? When was that article, Jozy?
So there's November 1st, 1949.
But I will say, Troy Simmons.
I think I mark it as arrest.
Arrest? Yeah, I don't have that on here.
Okay, go to conspiracy, actually.
Conspiracy? Got it.
I think that's it. They did search abandoned mines and stuff.
Yeah, police
in the area.
5 of conspiracy. I would actually just read that.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's really weird. This happens, but then it's not really mentioned again.
Okay. Yeah.
This is definitely, I'll read this one. Listen to my reader's voice.
There you go.
On a dark, stormy night.
You have to do your newspaper voice.
Yeah, newspaper voice. All right, here we go. All right, it starts out, says police suspect 5 of conspiracy in Sodder case, and the article states.
This is from March 5th, 1950.
March 5th, 1950, the Charleston Gazette on a Sunday. At least 5 persons are suspected of conspiracy in the case of the missing Sodder children. Detective Troy C. Simmons of the West Virginia Merchant Police reported yesterday. Simmons said he believed the suspects could be convicted for violation of the Red Man Act, which terms illegal the conspiracy of 2 or more persons to inflict bodily harm or damage property. The Charleston detective Smithers, Police Chief Mike Aquino, and George Sodder, father of the missing children, will leave Tuesday for Havre de Grace, Maryland. I have no clue if that's right, where they will question a man and his wife alleged to have been visiting near Fayetteville on Christmas Day of 1945. Early in the morning of that date, a fire of unknown origin leveled the home of Mr. and Mrs. George Sod. It says Sod. They just put Sod for whatever reason.
They made a typo. Give them a break.
You know what? Get it right. All right. Near Fayetteville supposedly took the lives of their 5 children. Later reflection, however, led to the parents a conclusion they still hold, namely that the children did not die in the fire, but were kidnapped or somehow escaped the ravages of the early morning blaze. And then the next sentence is not completed, so that should set the scene enough. Anyways,
but
so
again,
that was they hit a wall still.
But it's interesting, like they're like, we're gonna have arrest. We think there's a conspiracy, and then it's like nothing.
Yeah, then nothing.
It could be an irresponsible reporter too. That's like, oh well, we're going to Maryland.
And a detective.
Yeah.
So
you know what I mean? Like, oh, we're going to Maryland.
Listen,
It didn't say.
You don't know what was happening to the reporter. They probably had a tough job.
They put sod, okay?
Okay, but they have like, you're thinking back then it was like you have the little blocks of typeset. So like, it's not like you're just typing it up. I make mistakes too. And there's,
Hashtag fake news.
spell check.
Hashtag fake 50s news.
Gosh.
All right. Anyway.
The reporter is not part of the story.
But, if I was the people in Maryland, I'd sue the pig out of that reporter.
Well, they don't say a name, though.
Is it? Okay, let me beep it.
They don't say a name. They're just saying they're going to investigate somebody.
Yeah.
Which is, that's true. If they had said they're investigating a certain person for conspiracy.
But it said
5 people.
Yeah.
What did it say? The way
it
they
doesn't
worded
name
it,
who.
though, it says near Fayetteville and supposedly took the lives of their children. Supposedly? That's not allegedly.
It's the same thing, supposedly.
I mean, you say that now, you're getting sued. You better say allegedly. Anyway, all right, there you go. So they're trying to do some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Carry on, Miranda. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to get into a sighting. So it's unknown exactly how long after the second excavation this occurred, but sometime between then and late 1951, the Sodders received a letter from a missionary who claimed to recognize the children from the newspaper as the same children he saw in a house in Cortez, Florida. No,
this is the photograph later that I got up. I ain't showing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a sighting initially in
Cortez, Florida.
But before that in New York.
Yes, yeah, New York.
So New York and now Florida, potentially.
And there was probably ones in between then too. Because, like with all true crime cases, they got tons and tons of letters.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of letters. So it's unknown exactly when the sighting occurred, but Cortez just so happened to be the same city where Jenny's brother, Frank Cipriani, had lived since sometime in 1943. Sometime in 1951, Detective Simmons obtained the help of the Tampa Patrol and Detective System, a private investigation company owned by a man named Joe Carter. At the time he was hired, Joe Carter had been in law enforcement for 40 years, with 21 of those years in the local police department and 5 years as chief detective. On July 24th, 1951, Joe Carter wrote a letter to Detective Simmons that detailed his company's first day of investigation. He explains that they will have to conduct investigations on different dates in order to not create any suspicion due to how small the town was. In another letter on the same date, Mr. Carter states that they located the Cipriani property, which consisted of a pure oil gas station, several cabins, a drive line, and several trucks. He states that another Cipriani sibling, Jimmy, was there, and that he and Frank owned a business operating a drag line. They interviewed a Mr. and Mrs. W.J. Evers, who owned a tavern across from the Cipriani property. The Evers stated that shortly after the fire, Frank came into the tavern with a telegram in his hand about the fire, and he told them that he was going to go up there as his family seemed to be doomed, that his sister's whole family was burned up. They then state that he never came back to the tavern and never talked about it again. They state that prior to the fire, Frank was a regular visitor to the tavern, and they thought it was funny that he stopped coming around. The Evers also stated that they believed they saw Louis Sodder, but could not recall seeing the others. Mr. Carter also states that he talked to the state attorney, who had a file on the Sodder case for some reason, but it did not contain anything they did not already know. Mr. Carter goes on to describe Cortez as, quote, a very small place and very clannish, end quote, and that it would take some time to obtain more information.
Clannish as in The clan?
No, isn't just like really tight.
Tribes.
Really tight knit.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
So there's like some suspicion about who sent Frank this telegram, but I think that it was probably sent by his son, Joseph Cipriani, who still lived in Smithers at the time, and he was the one that was there at the scene of the fire that day with John.
Okay.
On July 25th, 1951, Mr. Carter writes that they talked to Mr. and Mrs. G.W. Bennett, who were tenders of the local drawbridge. They also mentioned the telegram Frank received and said, "It seems he took exceptional pains to let the telegram be seen around here." The Bennetts stated that the Ciprianis had 5 or 6 children, and the oldest was a girl of 18 years that was in college. And her name just so happened to also be Martha Lee, just like the missing Sodder child. The Bennetts stated they were positive they had seen Jenny, the daughter. Mr. Carter also states that they tried questioning several other people, but that, quote, "there seemed to be a hesitation to talk about this family," end quote.
So 1951 is when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Martha Lee would have been 12, right? She was 12 when in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
So the math tracks.
Yep,
But-
good math.
18.
Yeah.
But it was his daughter. He did have a daughter named Martha Lee. She was born before Martha Sodder.
So where did Martha Lee, that name, come from? Was it like a family name?
That I'm not sure. I think their mother's name was Martha.
Isn't it a flour that you make bread with?
Martha Lee. It's just interesting,
Sorry.
like the name, like that's a really,
Yeah.
they're both names.
No, yeah.
It's a pretty name.
common theme of
People naming.
using the same name. Jenny.
Martha White's the flour.
Mhm.
All right, carry on. I'm sorry, Miranda. You got to deal with ADHD every now and then.
No, you're good. So on December 28th, 1951, N.C. Rieger, I believe he worked for the Department of Public Safety, wrote to Superintendent Burchett of the Department of Public Safety and states that a Mr. Barnett, who was county commissioner of Cortez, Florida, stated that he definitely saw the Sodder children in Cortez, Florida after the fire. Mr. Barnett also states that Jimmy Cipriani makes a trip to Florida about every 2 weeks. Assistant Fire Marshal C.R. Cobb writes to a Hugh Culbreth, who was sheriff of Tampa, Florida, on January 22nd, 1952, and asked him to follow up on when Mr. Carter reported. It is important to note that Mr. Cobb used to be the deputy for Sheriff Culbreth, so he used to live in Florida.
It's crazy. Like this couldn't happen now. They'd be like, I
Yeah.
saw them. Take a picture. This is what you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. Or there'd be like camera footage.
A check your
Right.
ring camera.
or the
full.
kid would be like on social media.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
Ain't it crazy? Like imagine how involved you have to be to send a letter. It's like, how
I
do you
know,
even know
right?
about this across
Yes.
the country?
Well, they did put it in the paper.
I know.
that's
Well, I guess
true.
the paper's the
well,
only.
and it eventually too, it got like, I think it got picked up by like national media
Mhm.
as well, like
Mhm.
later on.
What does that mean? Other paper?
Magazines.
Radio. This just in, the Sodder family in Fayetteville, West Virginia.
I believe there was radio programs on it eventually. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there was.
So also in this letter, Mr. Cobb not only gets the ages of the missing kids wrong, but he also states that Maurice is a female instead of a male. Mr. Cobb also states that every lead has been run down, and yet in a document which details a meeting held on January 2nd, 1952, they admit that they never questioned Lonnie Johnson, who stole the chain blocks.
That'd be the first one.
Yeah.
Cobb also writes to a Roy Baden, who was a sheriff of Bradenton, Florida, on January 23rd, 1952, and asks him to look into it. The following document I'm going to talk about, it is unknown who sent it, who received it, or when it was sent. It was just part of the official reports.
Do I have that on the drive?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
It states that the document was received on February 18th, 1952 from a Mr. John Woodruff, special agent, FBI of the Miami office.
And what is this document?
I'm going to talk about what's in it. I'm not exactly sure, but it was sent to the officials in Fayetteville. And it was just included in their like file. That they
Gotcha.
had.
Okay.
But it doesn't say who sent it, who received it, or when it was sent. It doesn't have a date on it.
Perfect. Grain of salt document.
Yeah, exactly. So the document states that an Archie Wiley of the Tampa Patrol Detective Association, which is the one owned by Joe Carter, reported the case to the Miami office of the FBI. Wiley admitted that 2 of the children that reside in the home of Frank Cipriani, along with Martha Cipriani, are his children. The FBI checked school and birth records dating back to Christmas 1945, and some cases back to 1940 and 1941, and they proved that the 4 children living with the Ciprianis were theirs. The FBI interviewed Frank's wife, son Frank Jr., and daughter Martha, but did not interview Frank. All 3 of them told exactly the same story. They state that none of the Ciprianis went to West Virginia for the funeral, and they had no direct contact with the family until about a year later. So I do have a few notes about this document. This is not me blaming anybody. I need to, the facts. So Frank Cipriani did have 4 children, but only 3 of them moved with him to Florida. And at the time of this document in 1952, only 2 lived with him. His son Joseph stayed behind in Smithers, and his other son Edward lived in Manatee, Florida with his wife and newborn daughter in 1952. Also at the time of this document, his daughter Martha was 21 and in college in Gainesville, Florida, and his son Frank Jr. would have been almost 14. So I'm not for sure if when this person went to their house, if there were 4 kids in the house, or if they were just told by Frank that he had 4 kids. And that's what they checked, which they said they checked school records back to 1940. I don't know if they checked school records in West Virginia or only Florida, because the Ciprianis did not move to Florida until 1943. So there wouldn't have been any school records in 1940.
What would the reasoning been for just one of the kids to have taken?
Like sell them on the black market? I don't know. Like you.
What do you mean?
So I mean,
like they took that one,
right?
And then someone else took.
So
one
are
of the other ones.
Them keeping
right?
Yeah,
one of the. So, but I guess we have to. Some of the 5 children did die in the fire. Is what are we assuming that?
No, they didn't die in the fire at all.
You don't think any of them did?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so either.
But again, so where's the other? What would be the reasoning then for there to be 1 kid with the family?
This is a good point.
And then the remaining 4.
I think that they, after the fire, that they weren't kept together at all. They would have been separated. It would have been easier to, manipulate the kids if they were separated. I don't think that Frank kept the kids at all. If they were in Cortez at all, I don't think they were there for very long.
Yeah, this one.
So that's why this document is just so I don't put much thought into it, just because it's they say that he has 4 kids that live in the home, but at that time he didn't have 4 kids that lived in the home. So I don't know if they did actually go to the Ciprianis and interview them,
or just sloppy work,
or if they just made this document up or something like that.
But I like what your question, Jozy. I mean, it wouldn't be plausible. I mean, these kids were old enough to be like, why am I here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it is stated multiple times, George states throughout these articles, kidnapping is one of the suggested assumptions of what happened to the children.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. And I believe that's what happened.
Overseas.
Sorry, I jumped there.
No, this is good.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
you're good.
Speculation. That's what we do.
And then the sheriff that was contacted in Tampa writes back to Assistant Fire Marshal Cobb and admits that they did not contact anyone from the Tampa Patrol and Detective System because he did not believe that they would give them any information. And they also did not contact any of the people that the Tampa Control Detective System interviewed. They didn't contact any of them, and they didn't talk to Frank Cipriani, and they talked to business associates of his. And we're like, well, his business associates say that he's a good guy. Mm-hmm. And that was that.
I mean, this sounds pretty relative to today. I can see some people being like, they weren't going to tell me nothing, Harry. Let's just tell them we did it and get it over with.
Okay, so now I'm going to get into more sightings. Okay. So, like with most missing person cases, there were sightings all over the place. The one that I believe to be the most credible was by a woman named Ida Crutchfield, who owned the Alderson Hotel that was in Charleston. So after seeing the children's story in the papers, she reached out to officials and made a sworn affidavit with her testimony on June 18th, 1952. In it, she tells officials that she believes that 4 of the children stayed at her hotel a few days after the fire. She claims the children included 3 girls and a boy and were accompanied by 2 men and 2 women of Italian extraction. She could not recall the exact date, but stated the entire party did register at the hotel between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. and stayed in room 25, which was a large room with several beds. She said that she attempted to talk to the children, but the men became hostile and refused to allow her to talk to them. One of the men started talking rapidly in Italian, and immediately the whole party stopped talking to her. And then she claims that the whole party left the next morning.
Manja,
2 boys, 2 girls.
3 girls, 1 boy.
3 boys. So we think the oldest wasn't.
Yes, I will get into that later.
We're going to get into that, Jozy.
Because I mean, like the oldest was 15.
14, yes.
14. And at that point, he would be an adult.
That's old enough to like karate kick somebody.
Well, at least old enough to know who you. I mean, like, I guess you could. The younger ones, maybe you could say like, "Oh, I'm maybe I don't know." Like, you know, they could be like, "Oh no, that's not your name. You're this person now." Mm-hmm. But at like 14, I would say you have a pretty good memory of who you are, who your family is.
Hypnotism.
So I will get into this, but it's pretty much believed, not just by me, but by other members of the family, that Maurice did not survive very long. So, because he was the oldest, it's believed that he was the only one that was killed either that night or shortly after. Not in the fire, but yeah. But I'll get into that later. So in the second part of her affidavit, I don't find as credible. But she states that in August of 1946, a young Italian man came to the Alderson Hotel accompanied by a small boy that he claimed was his ward. According to Miss Crutchfield, this boy was Louis Sodder, and the child was not allowed out of the man's sight. They stayed in room 8 for 2 days and 3 nights. She claims that she was sure that the children were the Sodder children, but she did not remember seeing Maurice, who was the oldest. I don't know about her seeing Louis Sodder a year later, just because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to bring him back. I mean, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
Well, I think right after it happened, they said they were sighted at that in Charleston as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And during a meeting held on December 18th, 1951, in the office of the superintendent, in order to discuss the case, private investigator Troy Simmons informed them that he had received information from a Mrs. Raymond Wise, who had learned from her husband, who had been told by a Mrs. Tony Bree of Smithers. Mrs. Bree is alleged to have said that the Sodder children were at her house the night of the fire and that they left the next morning in a car with Florida license plates. And it was decided in that meeting that Mrs. Bree and Mr. Wise would be interviewed. In a letter dated January 8th, 1952, a Sergeant Callahan of the Department of Public Safety claims that he and Captain C.L. Walker contacted the Brees on November 19th, 1951. Mr. and Mrs. Bree denied that the children had ever been at their home at any point in time. They did admit that they were close friends with Jimmy Cipriani of Smithers and Frank Cipriani of Cortez, Florida, both of whom were brothers of Jennie Sodder. They also admit that the 2 men had been at their house at some point in 1945, but were not sure when. And at the end of this document, Sergeant Callahan decided to add that I have heard from time to time that Mrs. Bree is a little wild and not quite true to her husband.
Do you have this in your binder?
Thanks.
I think we should pull out the binder.
Let's binder it up.
Can we look?
Yeah, you go ahead and look at it.
Do.
Yeah. We're going to cut to the wide angle here.
Okay, hold on. So where are we at now in your binder?
Everything in the binder is in chronological order. But the first part is like official documents, and then the second part is letters. So it'll be somewhere in the letters.
Okay,
I can try to find it if you want.
Yeah,
because I know what it is.
I think you should. We should definitely because I mean it's crazy to. So sorry. These documents are from who again from your family?
Jenny, the granddaughter.
The granddaughter. Okay, so she kept.
So she received these from the state police, I believe.
And when did she receive these from the state?
Around 2007.
Probably when it went cold officially, or when it went cold before that. But
probably, yeah. Did she request them, or they just said like, "We're clearing out our files. Here you go."
Requested them. I believe.
FOIA, son. You know about that, Jozy. And while we're waiting, Jozy's wearing a Creepalachia shirt. Everybody check out creepalachia.shop for your fresh merch. But anyways, I just noticed that. Sorry, squirrel. But yeah, so and this binder is
it's just like a journalist's dream.
Oh yeah,
to be able to have this kind of documentation that was kept and so well maintained.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very beneficial because there's not a lot of detailed breakdowns of this. There's like the overview of the story and kind of the basic bullet points, but I'm hearing so much that I've never known ever, and that's about 80% of the conversation so far.
That's the point.
That's the point, guys and gals.
That's why I'm here.
We're going to solve a murder, and Fayetteville, get your act together. Get a memorial out on the lawn of the courthouse or something. I mean, we can do this. We do crazier stuff. Because it sounds like to me there's some funny business going on. But anyway, carry on.
Sorry. So this is, tell me again what this report, so it's January 8th, 1952.
Yes. So this is the letter that they wrote detailing the interview of the Breeze that stated that the kids were there at their house the night of the fire.
Okay. And this is like typewriter typing.
Yeah, show that, Jozy. Hold it up to your camera there at the microphone so people watching can see that there's actual documentation here. You can't read it, but there it is.
Yeah. For the top, it says like Department of Public Safety. And then it has, I think, the superintendent who was at the time.
Burchett, I think. Is that what it says? It's a little hard to read.
I think Callahan? At least that's who signed it.
That was the sergeant.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But again, like, that's how they did reports back then.
Yeah, yeah. Typewriters are cool. You have one?
No.
Okay, carry on. Doing great, Miranda. This is awesome. Anyone got to take a break? What are we doing? We good? I'm good. Sugar's good. Do you need to take a break? All right, let's take a quick break. We will be right back. And we're back. I have no clue where we stopped. There's been so much. But Miranda, you're doing great. We're halfway through, I think, at least. Where do you want to go next?
You wanted to show that?
Yeah. So
we got the letter. We just got done reading the letter that was mentioned.
Yeah. Well,
about.
I think I lost it. But I mean, it's just like, I think there's so many things in here. We've got a letter from the wife that's signed with her husband's name.
Oh, yeah. You were mentioning Miranda. So back then, women had to sign correspondence as Mrs.
name.
Yeah. So a lot of these
Mrs. George Sodder, Mrs. Yeah. They had to sign. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think like all these reports are interesting, but I'm assuming too, like, it seems like the officials involved in the case were getting quite aggravated with the family because of his ongoing belief that his children did not die in the fire.
Yes.
Their continued assertion that they're gone. Sorry.
Yes.
Even though we're going, on all these hunts for you. This letter in particular from... Let's see.
Which they openly criticized law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
So
they did not trust the officials in Fayetteville, and I'll get to reasons why for that.
Gotcha.
But so they, the private detectives would try to work with the officials, but the officials wouldn't work with them, and they were even told like, stop looking into this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like this letter from December 28th, 1951, it's from the NC Rieger.
Mhm.
And it's saying George Sodder has obtained another private detective. This time, the person is Odie Fisher. And then they talked about Fisher wanting to interview Lonnie and then being like, okay, like once he interviews Lonnie, like make sure we do all, like,
Yeah.
it's just a
They
continue.
said we just want to make sure that we put it in our report so that we
Yeah.
can show that we have been investigating all
Mhm.
along, even
Right.
though they didn't.
You can just tell like the tone of this is just like, he got another investigator.
Yeah.
A little
like,
snarky.
right.
Mhm.
And I think you can tell in some of the articles too later on, especially when this goes national, you'll see the mayor being like, none of that's true. Like, we did everything we could, you know. So I'm assuming that might be part of why maybe Fayetteville hasn't like recognized this, because initially, obviously, like, I think the investigators that were involved, like, you know, they're no longer around.
Yeah.
But like, there was a lot of contention between the Sodders and the people that believed them and the officials who were trying to close the case because they just couldn't, you know, come to an agreement. And the evidence, you know, was just so, I guess, sparse, but also contradictory.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I'm imagining that's why we don't see a lot of this now, is because of that contention.
It's time.
Well, there's even like one where it's like it details a meeting that they had, and they say, George Sodder acted in the usual manner.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And then they say, you know, that they took notes, but that what exactly happened in this meeting can't be determined. What do you mean? Like, you took notes of what happened during the meeting, but you can't say what happened?
It seems like their compassion ran out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it, you know, yes, initially after it happened, there's details of like community providing like food and you said
Mhm.
clothes and a place for them to stay. But then when this father is refusing to believe that his children perished just based on all of the inconsistencies and the sightings and everything like that, it just feels like the officials involved were saying,
Yeah.
we're over it. In a way.
Yeah. I don't care if you have 10 kids. You lose 5 kids in a fire,
It's-
your life is essentially over.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it's that the entire remainder of your life. And I can see him walking in a restaurant and people looking around like, there's George again. He's probably going to be hollering about the government. You know, something,
Yeah.
you know, I could just see this happening today.
Well, I can imagine too, as like the siblings that were remaining and the parents, like everywhere you go, being like, are like, do we see like our like, do we see our kid? You know what I mean? Like, that's got to be tough too, without a very definitive, because there's never really, I mean, yes, there's death certificates, but like, it doesn't seem like there's a definitive, like they are for sure dead. It's like, you know, some, but like, so like not having that definitive proof to really close the case, as parents, I'm imagining, one, you have hope, and two, without being given answers, there's always in the back of your mind. So it's got to be, it had to have been really tough for them. Like, I'm sure they would have maybe in a way to have given the proof to say like, your children they're gone.
Well, and that's what they asked. That's all they wanted. And I meant to mention this earlier, but they tell the newspaper in 1953 on September 10th, or this is in a newspaper, but the family is not particularly interested in punishing anyone. If there was foul play, they state they would be glad to waive charges or to sign any kind of release asked for if they can only regain their children or learn what happened to them.
Yeah, just want closure.
And you know, what their granddaughter tells me is that they had their own beliefs about who did it, and I'll get into that, but they weren't interested in getting anyone in trouble or ruining anyone's reputation or ruining anyone else's family. They just wanted the truth. That's all they wanted. And they repeatedly asked for proof that these kids died in the fire, but nobody would ever get anything.
Mhm.
And they just kept being like, well, there's evidence. And they'd be like, okay, but what is the evidence? What evidence do you have? and they just wouldn't answer him anymore.
Liver in a box. Bada bing.
And which I'll get into what they claim the evidence is. But
yeah. Well, we're still on sightings, correct? Are there more sightings?
Yeah, there's a couple more, yes. So I'm not going to get into that photo yet, but I will.
Gotcha.
I gotta go back down to where it was. Okay, so the sighting with Mrs. Bree. Okay, and then in a letter to Fire Marshal Raper from his Assistant Fire Marshal C.R. Cobb, they state that Raymond Wise of Charleston, West Virginia was interviewed. And Mr. Wise states that he did not know he did know Mrs. Bree. She never made any kind of statement to him about the Sodder kids. So like I said, Mrs. Wise, Raymond's wife, is the one that told the detective about this, but they never interviewed her. They only interviewed her husband.
Of course.
Naturally.
Of course.
The man speaks for the woman.
Even though she was the one that talked to the PI, they only interviewed him.
Oh, I'll tell you, Jenna came unglued. There's a contractor that came here and was like, "Can I speak to the man of the house?"
Oh, I would have gone.
If there's one thing you want to do,
lit on fire.
If you want to have an awful day, tell my wife that when you come to the house. All right, carry on.
It's also alleged in various newspapers that a motel manager between Fayetteville and Charleston saw the kids the morning after the fire, and a woman at a diner between Fayetteville and Charleston claims to have served them breakfast the morning after the fire, and they left in a car with Florida license plates. But these sightings were never investigated, of course. So I'm going to get into the efforts made by the Sodders and their detectives. So Detective George Swain tells a newspaper on November 14th, 1949, "I have hunted down and talked with honest people who were first on the scene and asked them this pointed question. Did you smell any flesh burning or hear any outcries? And all those who were there during the entire time of destruction stated they did not. The very fact that they did not smell flesh gives strong evidence to the belief that children did not perish in the flames." And in a letter written by the Sodders to Superintendent Burchett of the Department of Public Safety on August 9th, 1951, it is stated that 2 of our detectives were told by lawmakers in Fayetteville to stay out of this case and keep out.
Which, I know burning flesh is a distinct smell, but would you smell it if...
I've read different things. Most people say that if there are bodies inside a burning house, that you will smell it.
Oh, really?
Yes,
wow, that's terrifying.
That's what I've read.
I think the screaming would be more. I mean, I guess I don't know. You'd have to talk to a firefighter and be like, well, could they have inhaled smoke and gone unconscious?
That's what I've read too. But yeah, you would think that one of them,
at least one of them, the fact that there's 5 of them,
and the fact that John and George both heard their mother. If any of the 5 kids were up there, they should have also heard their mother yelling. They should have. And you would think that if John and George ran down the stairs, but one of the kids woke up and was stuck up there, that they would have heard them yelling, "Hey, help," whatever,
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah, I got a lot of speculation for the theory section because I have a lot of questions.
Well, I'm only going to add to that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you.
So they also stated we could not hire a lawyer in Fayetteville because all of them were afraid they would be put out of their office building if they took over our case. We heard nothing of an investigation being made by the state police. They merely said that the fire was caused by defective wiring, which is not true since the lights were still burning when we came out. Expert electricians said this could not have been the case. On November 21st, 1951, one of the Sodder detectives named Odie Fisher wrote to the Cincinnati Cremation, and I have that in there too, Cincinnati Cremation Chambers, my eyes jumped. To the Cincinnati Cremation Company to inquire about the possibility of the children burning up completely. Edward A. Schott who states he is counsel for the company, replied, stating, "It has been our experience that human remains being placed in our cremation chambers for a period of approximately 2 hours with an average temperature of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit will completely disappear, except for the bones which remain intact of sufficient size that parts thereof can be recognized as parts of the human skeleton." And that's still true today. I'm pretty sure they have to take the main ashes, but then they take the bigger pieces and they have to grind them up and then add them into the ashes. There's always bones found. And
I just found that letter.
Yes,
it's interesting. So now you would just email an expert.
Yeah, and they had to type all this out. And what I learned is that whenever they would write letters. So Marion was the oldest daughter. She was I believe a secretary, and she was really good at typing. And whenever they would send a letter, they would type it and then they would type a copy.
Yeah, because that's a copy at the top.
Yeah, so they could have a copy of it.
Because if you wouldn't have this.
Yes, exactly. Because, if they just gave it to the officials aren't going to give it back to them. So they wanted to make sure that they had a copy of everything. Okay, the Sodders received a letter on November 27th, 1951 from a William Morse, who was previously a firefighter in Galveston, Texas, before he moved to Charleston. In his letter, Mr. Morse states that in Galveston, he saw about 4 people burned to death, but you could still tell it was a body. He said that in December 1949, there was a fire on Court Street where 5 people burned to death. 2 of the people were in the worst of the fire, which lasted about 30 minutes, but their bodies were still in one piece. He also mentioned going to a fire that was so hot that it burned the paint off 2 fire trucks that were about 30 feet away, and the hose burned in the front yard. Once the fire was knocked down and they were able to search, they found the body of a baby who was burned very badly, but you could still tell it was a baby's body. And he states, in his own professional opinion, a house fire could not burn so long or so hot as to completely destroy a human body.
Especially a 15-year-old kid.
So that's where the crux of the argument comes from. I mean, you can have all the conspiracies you want, but I think the simple fact that remains
were not
substantial
found.
remains from all of the children.
Yeah, that's why the mystery is so captivating.
Because obviously all the other things that you pointed out are super intriguing. You could go down those different routes of was it a family member? Were they trying to get insurance money? Did they take them off to Florida? But again, the main basis of going on all those different routes is the fact that you don't have
an example would be this house in Greenbrier County. Even though we know she did it, it would be examining what happened after the fact.
Yeah, I believe they were able to find remains for every for all the children.
So there you go. Same air, same vicinity.
Not air. This was recent.
Well, no, I mean same environment.
Okay.
Yes.
You know what I mean? If there's any kind of weather implication. Now, granted, it's not. Even in the winter, it'd be harder to have a fire, you would think. But go ahead.
Okay. And in late February of 1952, Detective T.C. Simmons decided to withdraw from the case. He states his reasoning as he was upset that George was bringing in what he described as amateur investigators with which he could not work. On June 11th, 1952, a reward poster offering $5,000 to anyone with information related to the recovery of the children appeared in the Charleston Gazette.
The first
I think it's the flyer.
The fire...
Flyer. I think it's flyer.
Okay,
this one. That one. Yes.
When was this?
June 11th, 1952.
Okay. So this was before the Billboard.
I believe so. Yes. Yeah. And later that month was when Ida Crutchfield reached out and made her statement. And it's believed that she made her statement because this was the first instance of their pictures being in paper. So she saw that and was like, those are the kids I saw that night.
So this is obviously they're in black and white, but they are Italian. So I'm assuming
all their hair is brown.
Brown hair is brown eyes.
Yeah.
Manja. That means eat. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. That's the only word I know.
So I'm not going to get into this too much, but they received countless letters and mainly a bunch of nonsense. And even in 1963, a man gave a sworn statement to the state police insisting that the Mad Butcher killed the Sodder children.
No way.
If you know, you know.
Wow.
A sworn statement.
Who did
How
this?
much does that carry though at that point? Like,
When the Mad
like
Butcher was like
now-
60s.
I know, but
yeah,
like,
that's what I'm saying. He gave it in 1963.
Oh,
He
come
gave a
on.
sworn statement.
a sworn statement now, like if you're found to be lying, like criminal charges.
Yeah.
But like then a lot of people gave sworn statements.
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't
think-
seem like none of them were.
I think the official, well, especially with this one, the officials were just like, this is just a crackpot person that.
Sure. I mean, would they though? I mean, people were putting livers in boxes. They'd be like, you know what? That sworn statement
I
was
don't
pretty
know.
compelling. It makes sense. There was a liver in a box.
And then around 8 years after the fire, another reward poster was made that included descriptions of the 5 children. And that's the one I haven't. Actually, that might be the same one. That might
Oh,
be it.
that's this one? Yeah, it has the
But
descriptions.
in between them, we do have the billboard, which also has
Yes.
the reward
So
on it.
George eventually decided to erect a full-size billboard at the edge of the property with details about the case. I think that's the third billboard. That
Go
is
to-
the third
Go
billboard.
to the newspaper.
Newspaper. Here we go.
Oh no! Did it log out?
No, we're good.
So the
The first one?
Sodders.
The last one,
Last one.
September 11th.
September 11th.
And I'm imagining too, like he's did this himself. So I can't imagine how long it took to be able
Yes.
to make something, because it says like in the article, like he just finished it,
hmm
and this
He
is,
did have help. He didn't do it by himself. They did hire people to help them. Because this one was just made of like paper and stuff, I believe.
so he's just like
So
posting.
but the third billboard was made of concrete.
But I'm still trying to imagine like printing paper. It's not like, you go
Yeah.
to your, so like he had
So
to have someone like,
so I think they just had a big piece of paper or whatever, and then they just painted on it.
oh, you
Yeah.
So this one was
so
concrete?
Yes, so that one's concrete. So all of these were hand painted. Yeah.
But how
so
did you
that's
get the
hand-painted.
photos though?
Wow.
They probably just like nailed it. Like
Okay.
so the
Put glass over it or something.
the pictures were old school pictures taken prior to the fire.
Because not like
um,
not all the ages are accurate with the photos. Is that accurate? Is that correct? Or
So those are the age they would have been at the time of this billboard.
okay.
Um,
Oh, okay. Yeah. But the pictures were probably a year or two before.
they were a year before. Yeah, they're their
Okay.
school pictures.
Got it.
So the text on the billboard reads, "What was their fate? Kidnapped or murdered, or are they still alive?" $5,000 reward is offered by George Sodder for information leading to the recovery of any one or all 5 of his missing children. These children disappeared on Christmas Eve, 1945, when their home was destroyed by fire. A complete investigation of the burned premises failed to produce evidence of human bones or flesh. An affidavit has been signed by a person that she saw 4 of these 5 children in Charleston at her hotel 2 or 3 days later. They left the next day accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, although later 5 different people saw the same children in Cortez, Florida.
That's on the billboard.
Yes, that's on the billboard.
Yeah.
You
There's a
can't
lot
really-
of word verbiage
yeah.
out there at the bottom.
That's a lot to put on a-
Yes.
So okay,
Well, they didn't know top of mind awareness back then.
No,
You
but
can't
I'm-
boil that down to
I'm
4
like saying like
words.
so. I'm trying to. Where is this in Fayetteville? Like
It was
how many-
at the site, right?
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
like, how many? Like obviously, like this is not like on the highway.
How many car tops?
Yeah, like how? Obviously, like everyone in the town.
I
has
don't want to
been seeing
reveal
this for-
exactly where it is.
I understand. Okay.
But I can tell you when we're not recording.
Okay. But I mean, like having this up that long in the community, like it was seen. I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. It's a pretty busy road. Yeah.
Mhm.
So and it's not known exactly when this was made, but sometime after the first billboard was made, they created a brochure.
Oh, yep. We can see it.
A brochure titled "Why George Sodder of Fayetteville, West Virginia Wants to Know." The first mention of this brochure I could find was on July 15th, 1957, in a letter written by Captain N.C. Rieger to the superintendent of the Department of Public Safety, but it doesn't mention which superintendent. But the letter does state that it was sent to the governor's office.
Interesting.
So if you want to read it out loud, you can.
Who was the governor at the time?
When this was done, I believe it was Governor Barron, but don't quote me on that.
I'm trying to figure out what is the first page?
The first page is the front, yeah.
Right, but like it's folded.
Oh yeah, so so it would have been front and back, and then it would have just been.
So is the prologue the first?
It would have just been folded like this.
Yeah.
So this is all together.
The back side.
And then
that would be.
Yeah, you don't have to read it. Just a little skim, a couple sentences.
Well, like so I'm guessing this is a very typical thing back then to have like pamphlets made about certain issues, you know, things you're wanting people to vote for or like inform them of. So it looks like it goes over initially what happened, you know, that, you know, 5 children were supposedly died in a fire in 1945.
It says it's got some design going on. It's got Y and big question marks on the front of it.
And it looks like so it says, we have a few questions to ask. Why did Miss Blank call us at 12:30 that night? Was she checking to see if the telephone wire had been cut yet? She called and asked about a man that we didn't even know at the time. Number 2, why did the fire chief, F.J. Morris, come to the scene of the fire where he called during the fire to come... Wait. Why did he come to the scene of the fire when he was called during the fire to come to the rescue? Why? Oh, sorry. Why
no judgments. Okay,
dyslexia. It's the thing.
Oh, you're doing good.
You're good.
Oh, I thought they were typing like that. I mean,
no. I'm just reading it incorrectly.
Gotcha.
So it's like a lot of the questions that we've already asked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why did it take so long to come to the fire? Why did that woman call?
Mm-hmm. So they're letting the higher ups know, like, hey, listen, and we do know the governor got this.
Well, it seems too that like they're specifically on the back page, they call out Fire Marshal Raper. Why did he lie? Why did he say he was at the scene of the fire the day it happened when he really didn't come to the scene until 3 days later? Why should a man occupying a position of such importance concerning fires not inquire as to whether or not there were any remains found in the ruins, especially since this would have been to his credit as a fire marshal?
Why did Lonnie Ray steal my blockchain?
But I'm guessing too, this just adds to the these officials of their like over assertion of, no, we're done. Case is closed.
Yeah.
You're done.
You know,
You're done.
Again, like it's a father who lost.
Yeah, I mean, of course. It sounds like there's some egos involved, but also there's some sketchiness going on. I mean, let's just be honest. Yeah, but that's good to show that. Let me look up the governor just so I'm sure. What year was that?
I'm not sure exactly when this was sent, but 1957 maybe.
Oh, yeah, there isn't a date on this.
No.
But it says why George Sodder, a Fayetteville, West Virginia.
Cecil Underwood was in 57. Yeah, he's that old, or was that his? Was that his son? That I'm going to show my terrible
this his signature?
social
or is
studies.
That just like a little squiggle?
I think that's just like a swiggle. Yeah, I think that's just like a
calligraphy.
So Underwood won in 56. I don't know if that helps.
So yeah. So he would have been the governor.
Anyway.
But I'm assuming he's mailing this to the governor.
Yes, they mailed it to them.
Yeah.
Whether or not they check their mail.
Very
they
true.
did receive it. Yeah. The governor did receive it. Yes.
How do they know that they received it?
I actually just a few days ago, Jenny was contacted by somebody at the Cultural Arts Center. They found a file labeled Sodder that was all the letters and everything that the governors received, and that was in it.
Wow. So they're still finding stuff.
Release the letters.
Release the letters.
It was already everything in the file I already had.
Oh, okay.
So
never mind.
It wasn't anything.
I know,
new.
but like
You
the
released
fact that
the
they
letters.
documented it and like kept it.
Yes.
You know, it'd be interesting to see like what kind of documentation they put on like received on this day.
Mhm.
And also like if you're keeping this and you're not doing anything with it, like that's very odd. Or maybe like they were required to keep it for like public information.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'd probably keep that and be like, sorry.
So on February 19th, 1960, Marion Sodder, who was then Marion Crowder because she had gotten married, wrote a letter to the editor regarding a story published 10 days earlier detailing a house fire that killed a family of 4. The house was also a 2-story, 8-room house, and there was no response from the fire department for several hours. Apparently, the bodies laid in the smoldering ashes for 5 hours, and when the fire department arrived, they waited for the ashes to cool instead of using water. Despite this, all 4 bodies were easily found, including that of a 2-year-old. Marion's letter is as follows. I love Marion, by the way. I'm just going to say that because she fought the good fight. Is it possible for a farmhouse of 8 rooms to burn completely to ashes and the bodies of 4 persons to be found almost intact? Yet a smaller house burns, and the law authorities say it is their belief that 5 bodies of 5 children, 6 to 14 years old, were completely destroyed, bones included. Now I ask you, don't you think they insult the intelligence of us and the rest of the people of West Virginia to expect us to believe such Tommy rot? Or maybe this is just the safest way to keep a horrible crime undercover.
Tommy rot. Heck yes.
Tommy rot.
This is Tommy rot. That's the perfect thing to say.
You
And
don't
yeah.
have to take that.
Yeah, shout out, Marianne.
Shout out, Marion.
How old was she at this point?
Oh, jeez. What year was this? 1960. So she would have been, she was 17 in 1945. So I can't do math right now.
She was 17, and this was like, what, 15, 20 years later?
This was 1960. Yeah. So 15 years later. Yeah. So she was in her 30s.
Yeah.
She was a feisty.
Heck
Yes.
yeah. I'd say Appalachian grandma. It's like, you ain't going to tell me that this is going to happen and I'm going to just sit here and believe
then,
it.
I'll read some letters that were sent by Sylvia, who was 14 at the time.
Which, that's gotta, like, we've talked about, like, how the mother, like, you know, the mother and father, like, carry this on, especially, like, George is, you know, particularly noted, but, like, the kids, like, this would have carried on to them, like, wanting to be like,
Yes.
that's so, I can't imagine, like,
It's devastating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
So on March 16th, 1961, she writes to Governor Barron, Sir, I'm writing you with a plea for help. I'm the youngest sister of the 5 children who were kidnapped in 1945. You are probably familiar with the case because my father, George Sodder, said that he talked with you some time ago, and you suggested that he write to you. I was under the impression that this might possibly mean that you intended to help us in fighting my brothers and sisters. I'm eagerly awaiting your reply, Sylvia Sodder. And then, oh, dang.
Governor William Wallace Barron.
And then, Dear Mrs. Sodder, I received your letter of March 16th in which you suggested reopening the familiar Sodder case of 1945. For some reason, your family apparently cannot believe or has never been willing to accept the fact that these children were in fact burned to death in the fire.
this is the governor.
This is the governor.
No way.
I have checked this out thoroughly with the Department of Public Safety, and all the records indicate that there was no kidnapping and that the children were destroyed by the fire. You will do well to reconcile yourself to this fact. Be assured that you have my complete sympathy and understanding.
He just said, little lady,
Yeah.
sit down.
He just mansplained her right on the
yeah.
right on a
Oh, I
letter.
guarantee, too, the fact that it's, like,
A woman?
a woman.
Oh, yeah.
He's like,
Listen.
now listen here, little girl.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can hear him clapping on there like,
He's
Is your
so-
husband at home?
Exactly.
Should we talk to
She
him?
was 19 when she wrote this, I believe. So thank you for answering my letter. However, I must question some of the statements you made in your reply. For example, what are the records which prove there was no kidnapping and that the children burned to death in the fire? Let's be honest, Governor Barron. Doesn't the evidence available point to the fact that the house was set afire and the children kidnapped? There was a hearing in the office of Mr. Burchett in 1952. The only facts, had to do that because it's in here, derived from that meeting were distorted. You could see this for yourself if you were to take the time to check the record of that hearing thoroughly. At the time of the hearing, my father was told that all suspects would be brought in for questioning. This has not been done, although no new evidence has been brought in to prove that the children were burned to death rather than kidnapped. Neither I nor my family can reconcile ourselves to the fact.
and she's facts is in quotation marks saying,
Yes, to the fact that the children were destroyed by the fire until and unless we get the evidence which has been spoken of so many times. Governor Barron, why not clean up our state, which was his slogan.
she put that in quotes.
She did.
Oh, I love this lady.
Ooh, I know.
Dude, could you imagine beefing with the governor
And
by
then-
court letter? And
Can you
then-
imagine some, like, tweets?
Yes. And then
I mean, I've seen some governors go back and forth online
Yes.
lately, and this is what it reminds me of.
and this is written by
And she's-
Marion in 1963. Yeah. Sylvia was 19 when she wrote that. So Sir, you received a letter early in the year 1961 asking for help in the mysterious case of the disappearance of the Sodder children. It was written by my younger sister, Sylvia Sodder. I just read the answer she received from you. You said that for some reason, our family was unable to believe that the children were burned to death. Sir, let me tell you, it is not just for some reason.
In quotes.
It is because of the true facts, and I can give you plenty of them. As long as we know and can prove they weren't in the fire, we will never accept this false assumption of the law officials. Of course, the Department of Public Safety would have records indicating no kidnapping. They did nothing to solve this case. Why shouldn't they keep their records clear? Why don't you check the facts instead of a few false records? My father is still waiting for an answer to the question directed to Burchett and that creature who at that time was the state fire marshal. It concerned the fact that since it was their opinion the children died in the fire, on what did they base this opinion? That question is still pending. If any of you have any evidence that the children died in the fire, come forward with it at a public hearing, any place. This is a request. As for reconciling ourselves to the fact that children were burned, we will never be reconciled to that. She underlined it.
Good for her.
Since all the facts prove exactly the opposite, then that really isn't a fact, is it? Tell me, had they been your children, would you be reconciled to such a thing?
No.
P.S. If you could just convince the county authorities to sign a statement asking the Federal Bureau of Investigation to enter this case, it would be the most important step you could take to solve this case. As you know, they refused to do this in the past.
I mean,
good for y'all, man. But unfortunately, it's hitting a wall. Like, why would the governor respond, first off, in such a way of...
I know.
Just make up something.
Like, how rude. Like, you can't...
It seems like it touched a nerve, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those...
Oh, can you imagine they got that later? I bet they
never
screamed
replied
and
back.
yelled about that for 2 days.
Yeah, they never replied.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like one of those things where like his administration's probably like, oh, you know, those
Sodder people.
He's like, I got this. I got this.
Yeah.
Leave it to Wally, son. Let me write them out.
Well, also too, like I'm imagining like this is the time like where he is, what's it called? Like he's dictating the letter to his secretary. So he's like, tell her.
Yeah.
And I love that she threw his campaign slogan back in his face.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Okay, and then in 1960, a second version of the Billboard was put up, and sometime before 1966, a second section was added to it. So it was kind of like catty cornered together.
Mm-hmm.
And the Billboard doubled the reward to $10,000, which would be $100,000 today.
And this was like, what was the family like? What was their business? What would have been their source of income at the time?
Trucking, and they owned coal trucks and just trucks for various things. Really, they just owned a trucking business.
But this would have been a significant amount of like,
their
livelihood.
Well, and George even said they were like, if people pointed out that George didn't have this money, and he said, "I will literally sell everything I own if that means getting my kids back."
Mm.
So it's not necessarily that they had this money, but if any information they got, they would have gotten that money. They would have figured it out.
I'm wondering too, like,
could you imagine feeding 10 kids? That'd be impossible back then. Now you can DoorDash, be like, chicken nuggets, everyone.
Well, like, you know, I don't think zoning was a thing back then, but I'm imagining whoever is like nearby calling the sheriff to be like, this is a hazard in our neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like complaining about the billboard. I'm imagining like there was people on both
literally
sides.
Right off the side of the road. And even now there's nobody around them. Yeah. So it's like pretty, you know.
But I'm still imagining like people in the community calling to be like, get that taken down or like cite them for something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, now you think about like there would be so many people would definitely like try to cite a local law to get stuff like that taken down.
And
if it impedes on their day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And part of the billboard said, these children were kidnapped on Christmas Eve, 1945, and the house was set afire to cover the crime. And then, so there's not any clear pictures of the second section of this billboard, but I found this paragraph in a newspaper, and it, from what I can tell, it lines up pretty closely to the second billboard. So I think this is what was on the second billboard, or the second section of the billboard. So A complete investigation of the burned premises failed to produce evidence of flesh or human bones. It is inconceivable to the intelligent mind that these children burned in that fire. Only a few who are interested in not having the crime solved persist in saying the children died in the fire. We would welcome at any time an opportunity to have an open discussion. However, they seem to prefer to ignore the issue. If by any chance some of the ex-officials hurriedly come to the erroneous conclusion that the children died in the fire and sincerely believe in the protection of helpless children, we would appreciate it if they would re-examine their consciences, and lend a helping hand where it is badly needed. Respectable citizens who believe in the administration of justice for all and the protection of innocent minors. Have you any suggestions as to what we could do about it? And then the third one was built sometime after 1975, which was 6 years after George passed away. He passed away in 1969.
So who would have made the third?
Jenny would have had it made. She would have hired somebody.
Is that this one?
Yes.
Okay.
This billboard was made from cinder blocks and placed on a concrete foundation with a small roof, making it more sturdy and less likely to be affected by weather than the previous.
Oh, so they built this whole structure for
yes,
this.
They built a whole structure.
Is the last photo George?
No, the last photo.
That's the photo.
I'm about to get into. Another difference in this billboard is the addition of a sixth picture of an older man believed to be Lewis by George and Jennie. Okay, so sometime in 1967, George and Jennie received an envelope that was postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. The envelope contained a photo of an older man that George and Jennie believed looked like an older Lewis, who was 9 when he went missing. The back of the photo said, "Lewis Sodder, I love brother Frankie." It's like ILIL in lowercase boys, and either A90132 or A90135. However, Sylvia, the youngest, remembered the back saying Lil, like LILIL boys, which the Sodders believe was slang for little boys aged 32 or 35. Sodders paid a PI $400 in advance to go to Central City, Kentucky and investigate, but the PI was never heard from again.
What?
He just took their money.
I'm about to get into it. Yes.
Oh, he's a scam artist.
Yeah.
You're thinking that he died.
No, when I was a kid and I heard that, I was like, oh, somebody like got to him. No, he just took the money.
I think that's who built my deck. Go ahead.
So George and Jennie firmly believed that this picture was of Lewis and added it to the billboard. However, I was able to determine it is more than likely not. So Amazon has like various kinds of facial recognition software, and one of those is facial comparison. And I fed both pictures into it, and it said that there was a less than 1% chance that they were the same person.
Did it come up with like a ping of like who that could be, or like
no? Due to this and the fact that this picture brings more questions than answers, I decided not to look into it any further. It's believed that it was possibly sent by a detective in order to get money from the Sodders.
Gotcha. And those listening, it's you can look up this photo, but it's a nice looking Italian man in his 20s. There you go. That's all I know what to say.
And I will add an interesting comment made by George and Jennie to a newspaper in 1968, which was, quote, "That letter, like all our others, had been opened and then resealed, meaning that someone was opening our mail." And okay, so sometime in 1968, the Sodders received a tip about 2 men in Texas claiming to be Maurice and Lewis. George and his son-in-law, Grover Paxton, who was Sylvia's husband, drove all the way to Texas to investigate this. They were unable to find the woman who made the tip, but the local police were able to point them to the 2 men who denied ever saying that and then also denied being their sons. George was satisfied but disappointed, and he and Grover immediately drove back to West Virginia. So George was really sick, and their daughter Jennie tells me that Grover literally drove from West Virginia all the way to Texas, and then they immediately turned around and went back. And as somebody that has driven from Texas to West Virginia over a dozen times, I can't imagine how he did that.
Do you go in one trip?
Yeah, I go in one trip.
Do you? Good for you.
I'm just kidding.
It's a long story.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and he like George was so sick that he just laid down in the back seat like the whole drive. Like he was his health was really bad at that point. So the History Channel did an episode on this, and it wasn't great. History Channel, if you're listening,
It sucked.
it wasn't great. But they try to state that George believed to the day that he died that these were his boys, but that's not true. George knew that those were not his kids. And George passed away on August 16th, 1969 from a long illness. And Jennie Sodder kept the billboard up and even had it updated sometime after 1975. And Jennie continued to give interviews about her children until she passed away on February 15th, 1989. And I have a couple of her final interviews. So, a newspaper interview on July 11th, 1976, when she was 73 years old, quote, "I'm going to keep on trying. I want the case reopened. I want my children back. I know they're alive. I want justice done and some questions answered." End quote. Mrs. Sodder wants to know, why did the officials go to so much trouble to try and convince her that her children were dead? Why were the phone wires cut during the fire? But most importantly, she wants to know where her children are.
Bro, the governor even did. That's in writing.
Yeah. And then in an interview she gave to a newspaper on August 19th, 1976, she tells the following story. One late July afternoon, God, my hair is
Go ahead.
in my mouth. Late afternoon, she was watching TV when she heard the crack of a gunshot. She said, "I came to the door to see what it was. It sounded like it came from the road, so I walked out to where my billboard stands. I thought someone may have killed a rabbit in my garden." When she reached the billboard, she found one large hole and several smaller ones. The small ones had BBs in them, but about 2 feet under Maurice's picture was this large hole that could only have been made with a shotgun. She continues saying, quote, "I'm not scared. I don't know what they were shooting at, but it's not the first time I've run into this." End quote. She goes on to say that around 3 years earlier, she was in her backyard gardening when she heard a bullet hit the roof of her house and became convinced that someone across the street was aiming at her. When asked if she thought it would do any good to inform the authorities, she replied, "What's the use? If we had the right kind of law around here, they would have done something 30 years ago. There's more important things than a billboard." And she also states, "Look, if I was going to die, I would have died in that fire 30 years ago. I'm going to fight this thing out, and nothing is going to get me to give up hope that my children aren't still alive." And after Jennie passed, Sylvia, her husband Grover, and their children, Jennie and Eric, continued their own investigation, but I am going to leave that for her to talk about if she ever decides to.
Sure.
So before I get into the official reports.
Theories? All right. I have questions. So my main question is, okay, they weren't there before this fire started.
Right.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, it's obvious, but how do they get them out of the house without George and Jennie knowing? Like how,
Okay.
or maybe they snuck out. I don't know. But
so I want to go through the reports before I tell you my theory.
Yeah. We got an hour 20 minutes. Let's do it. You think we can do it? Oh, go ahead, Jozy.
No.
You got any theories?
That's more
because mine are just questions. Okay,
yeah.
They didn't die in the fire. I think that is evident. And where were they? So
yeah, but again, it's like what? Yeah.
But what does that look like? Like, how could they not know
who they were?
Like, how did George and Jennie not know that they weren't in the house if they weren't in the house? All kinds of things.
I will get into that.
Let's do it.
So I mentioned before that we can't trust these reports. And I think you read in the brochure where they say that the fire marshal Raper was not there that day.
Right. And
I was able to prove that he wasn't there that day, but he claims in his 1950 report that he was.
Is there contradicting evidence?
Yes.
Nice.
So, they say that he was not there the day of the fire. So I learned from a local Fayetteville firefighter. I didn't ask him if I could say his name, so I'm not going to say his name. But that it was highly unlikely that the fire marshal was there that day due to the fact that during that time, because of the war, the fire marshal department was required to be at the steel mill in Alloy, and they would not have been able to be reached until they came home for the weekend. And then I found over 50 newspapers about this fire, and several of them were published the days after the fire, and only one of them states the fire marshal was there. Two of them state that he was not. So the first newspaper was published on December 26, 1945, and stated, an investigation by the office of the state fire marshals was also expected after survivors of the George Sodder family expressed an opinion the disaster was arson. And prosecuting attorney Carl B. Vickers authorized Fire Chief F.J. Morris to direct the search. Today, the prosecutor had been unable to contact a member of the state fire marshal's office. And then the second was published on December 27th, 1945, and states, a representative from the state fire marshal's office will arrive on Saturday to investigate the possibility of arson. So I don't think he was there that day. And in their 1950 report, they don't state exactly when they arrived. They just say they were present throughout the day. And then in a letter written by the fire marshal to a senator on April 4th, 1950, he states, this investigation was opened by the state police, and this department was called in later. But then in the fire marshal report written in 1951, they state that they received a call from Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Carson around 9 a.m. and arrived to the scene of the fire around noon. But then in a letter dated July 19th, 1951, from Superintendent Burchett to George and Jennie, he states, our department, meaning the Department of Public Safety, conducted the initial investigation, which began about 8 a.m. on December 25th. Later, members of the fire marshal's office investigated the same case. And there was exactly one newspaper that mentions that one member of the fire marshal's office was there, but in their report, they state that two members were there. And the newspaper was based out of Montgomery and published on December 26, 1945, and only quotes prosecuting attorney Carl Vickers, who is from Montgomery, whose family still lived there at the time of the fire. And he tells this newspaper that a member of the fire marshal's office was present and agreed with the ruling of accidental fire. But he also claims that a piece of spinal column was found that was then placed in a container and then buried in the center of the basement.
Here we go again.
But when they found that vertebrae, it wasn't in a container and it wasn't in the center of the basement. They did not find a container with anything in it. So
what is it with these people saying they're going to bury these things in boxes?
But he told them that the day after the fire. He told them that.
Yeah.
And so this is the only newspaper that claims that both of these things that we know are false. And so also in the 1950 report, Fire Marshal Raper claims to have told George not to fill in the basement until he could finish the investigation. And yet Carl Vickers tells that same newspaper, quote, the place where the modest home of Mr. and Mrs. George Sodder stood will become the burial place of the 5 Sodder children. That is the family's decision. So if he was told not to fill in the basement, why is the prosecuting attorney telling the papers that that's the plan?
There's a lot of,
So
go ahead, Jozy.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was going
go
to say,
ahead.
I found that report.
Yes.
It talks about like the people who searched the property for the debris.
Mm-hmm.
And it lists other officials, like it lists like Chief Morris, it lists the Sodders, but he doesn't list himself as a person that searched.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well,
It just says other persons were present and possibly assisted in the search of the debris at different times during the day.
yes. And he also claims that he never made a report because the Department of Public Safety did. But when the Department of Public Safety made their report, they state that the fire marshal made an investigation. But he said he admits he did not make an investigation. So
There's a lot of cover-up ingredients.
So-
I hate to put on the tinfoil hat, but
another reason.
I'm going to do it.
So another reason to find the involvement of Carl Vickers suspicious is contained in a statement made by Marion Sodder in 1968, where she says, quote, "We asked the prosecuting attorney to call in some people who were considered suspects in this case. He said he could not question these people because they were personal friends of his. At another time, he said, today they burned your house down, but tomorrow they may burn mine, and I have children too."
You
Dun,
know,
dun.
there's okay, so we got sloppy reporting. We've got
No.
well, no, okay, hang on. We've got sloppy
Listen, sloppy reporting.
sloppy
from the fire
reports.
Not journalists.
Not from journalists, only later when they spelled it sod. Sod is grass, not the people. But anyway, so we've got that. We've got multiple parties, including the governor,
Mhm.
writing, trying to get this family to shut up. Now,
Mhm.
how often does that happen? The
Mhm.
governor's typically going to be like, I do not care what you're doing. I'm going to go.
Not
You know.
then, I would feel like it would be pretty.
Well, since it was such a big case, maybe he was trying to do a PR thing.
But you would
there's-
think that he would be a little bit like more professional or just more.
Yeah.
So I was also able to find in my research several connections between not only prosecuting attorney Carl Vickers and the Janudelos, but also several other people involved in this case, such as the fire chief, the insurance agent, Rosser Long, J.D. Schultz, who was a member of the coroner's jury, funeral home owner C.I. Dodd, and Reverend James Frame. And
just as a reminder, because that was like 2 hours ago, the it was proven that they raised the insurance
Yes.
and owned the policy on the house.
yes.
When does that happen? All right, go ahead. And if you're related to, how do you say it?
Janudalo.
Janudalo. If you're related to them now, this is nothing against you, okay? This is not even saying that anything happened, technically. I mean, we can speculate all we want, but that's a little weird. So I think you could admit, but go ahead.
Listen, it's awfully suspicious. And I am not afraid to say that I'm not saying he set the fire, but I am saying that he probably masterminded all of this.
Probably new
Oh, 100%.
with that. I mean,
Because,
come on.
like I said, in the 1950 report, they literally mention that Janudalo made the threat and that he raised the insurance, but they didn't interview him.
Yeah.
They literally say Janudalo was never interviewed.
That's enough evidence. You give that to Tom and Ashley right now, Jozy. They'll prosecute that.
Those
I mean,
are
it's circumstantial, but come on. Tom Truman and Ashley Aker at the Raleigh County Prosecution Office. But anyway, shout out.
Well, they probably, honestly, they would be. I mean, if we're thinking about like locals, like a lot of people, it seem like should have been conflicted out of any kind of. But then again, like who would they have called in?
I mean,
that may not have been associated with the family or people involved. Like, because a lot of the, fire chiefs, police chiefs, mayors, I mean, they did know each other.
Yes.
And so it would have been a lot easier back then to have said, like, we're all going to work together potentially to maybe silence or dictate how this case is going to go.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine the good old boy system in the 40s?
I mean, it still
Mhm.
exists today, so I can only imagine how worse it would have been.
So,
You said we have how much time left?
we got an hour.
Okay. I'm not going to get into everything I wanted to get into.
Get into everything, and then I'll cancel my haircut. I don't care. I'm dedicated to the cause.
I'm going to talk about the first fire marshal report. It was 17 pages, made on June 30th, 1950, which was 4 years and 6 months after the fire. Mentions that the women that came from the bar that night did not see any of the children appear at the windows. It states that, so it's not for certain whether Detective Swain chose to resign or whether the Sodders made them resign. It's not for sure, but it mentions in this one,
He may got fired.
it mentions in the report that he was discharged by the Sodders, but he says that he chose to resign.
Right.
So we're not sure.
Resign from his position or the case?
Resign from the case.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And then, so here's another example of, them trying to push that the Sodders only believe their children were kidnapped because of the detectives. Quote, the Sodders had been unduly confused, misled, and disturbed from the beginning by unfounded theories expressed by some of the private investigators and others, some of which were merely wild dreams and fantasies. And like I said, George and Jennie reached out to private detectives themselves. Like after this, they were reached out to by private detectives, but they made the decision to reach out to PIs in the first place.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they were involved at all. I want to clarify that. But is that a theory?
What did you say?
That some people think that George and Jennie may have known?
Oh,
but is that out there? I mean, I don't think that's evident that they would not have pursued this as diligently their entire life.
The billboards would indicate. I mean, they didn't leave.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like,
they stayed there. Yeah.
You would have thought if they were like...
Yeah, chalk that one off the list.
But I'm assuming they stayed because they were thinking like...
If the kids ever come back.
Right.
Sure.
Where are they
also,
go?
this was their home. They had their business here. Like,
But also, like, it's not easy to find people as it's... You know what I mean? Like, I'm assuming if the kids ever were, in a position to find their parents, they're not going to be like Googling, George and Jennie Sodder. Like, they're probably going to go to their last known location.
Reports state that the vertebrae found in 1949 could not be considered of any significance to the case. This report also states the cause of the fire has not been determined. There's no direct evidence or facts that would definitely establish the fire as incendiarism. The fire may have been of accidental origin, even though the Department of Public Safety report says that it was due to faulty wiring. And they try to state that, again, that George kept a bunch of gasoline and a large supply of tires in the basement, but George denied that. And then Juno was a co-signer for a loan on the house and the beneficiary of the $1,500 life insurance. The insurance was raised to $1,750 without telling the Sodders and was paid out after the fire. And then all of a sudden, on page 13, after mentioning twice in this document that no remains were found that day, they make this claim. Jimmy Cipriani states that he first knew of the fire when Janudo called and told him. When he arrived around 10 a.m., a random Italian man unknown to him showed him something in a tub on paper which appeared to him to be several joints of backbone, approximately 18 inches with a mass of flesh attached. The person who showed him gave no comment or explanation. And he never said anything to his sister, never said anything to the officials. This 1950 report is the first time this is ever mentioned.
Yeah.
And then the following is under the section titled Statements. This report claims that Chief Morris received 2 calls about the fire around 12:30 a.m. He either got the time wrong or he received a call before the fire was set, because Jennie got the wrong number call at 12:30.
So this is from the 1950 report that Raper made. It's interesting.
C.R. Cobb, his assistant, made.
Okay, I'm seeing that now. C.R. Cobb. It's one of those things too, where like if this report had been made, because I'm assuming the family didn't. Did the family get this report?
No, they never got this report.
So like, because this is one of the things that as a journalist, like you'd be waiting for them to make their final report. The report should be made public. You couldn't FOIA it. Like these are the things that you would comb through and like ask questions. But like, again.
Well, it's also important to note that whenever George and Jennie would write to senators and governors, those officials would then write to the fire marshal. The fire marshal would send them this document.
Yeah.
And then the Sodders would write back, or the officials would write back to the Sodders and be like, well, we read the report. There's plenty of evidence to say that the kids died. And, George and Jennie didn't see this report. And they'd be like, what evidence are you talking about?
Yeah.
And nobody would tell them.
Sure.
And so Chief Morris admits he did not tell the Sodder family, acting coroner, assistant prosecuting attorney, or any other official about the mass that he had found. Remember that. That's going to come up in another report. Mr. Morris cannot or will not offer any explanation for his peculiar and apparently secret handling of the matter and not reporting and presenting to the proper persons and authorities any things he may have found in the debris such as has been described. And it also mentions that he was a member of the inquest and did not mention the mass either. And then mentions how Lonnie Johnson admitted to cutting the telephone wires. But then right under that, there's a note that it says, either statement could not be true unless a ladder or other device was used. The wire was cut 14 feet from the ground and 2 feet from the pole. And then the following is under summary and opinions. So the very first line says, your investigator is not in a position to give any opinion as to the fate or whereabouts of the children. No motive can be found to substantiate the theory of murder or kidnapping. No insurance was carried on the children. It does not seem reasonable that the children could have left the home without some of the family being awakened, and certainly could not have been forced. If the children are alive, it seems that one of them at least would have contacted friends or family. Awful lot of assumptions being made there.
Yeah. We know for a fact there's no insurance policy. Well, I mean, surely.
On the kids.
Not on the kids, no.
Yeah.
But Janula wanted George to get insurance on the kids, but George said no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the second time in this report, he states, it is impossible to determine the cause of the fire. No motive or evidence of arson has been found, and no outstanding hazard is known that night to have resulted in an accidental fire. The moving of the ladder cannot be taken too seriously. Someone, even a member of the family, may have moved the ladder without the knowledge of either Mr. or Mrs. Sodder. Really?
Hmm.
You think one of the family members just threw the ladder over an embankment?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm lazy. I lay stuff around the yard all the time, but that's an odd place to put a ladder, for sure.
To date, every bit of evidence available has been studied thoroughly, and every lead, even the common gossip, has been investigated, and the only facts found have been set out before in this report, which is really funny because they literally admitted they did not question Judelow. So that's the 1950 report. The following report, it doesn't have a date, but it's titled Resume of Investigation of Sodders Fire. So it's anywhere between the June 1950 report and the report made in 1952, and it's 8 pages. And this is when they decide to be like, oh yeah, you know what? We got the call about the fire at 9 a.m. and then we got there around noon, even though that newspaper says they were not able to get a hold of anybody from the fire marshal's office. And then, Raper and Welcher proceeded to where the inquest was being held, after which an attempt was made to talk to both Mr. and Mrs. Sodder, but it was realized they were broken up too badly to carry on an intelligent conversation.
What does that mean? Like, sounds like they're pretty put together with all this. You know, they can't talk. Well, when was that?
In a report written sometime in 1951.
So do the reports seem to, I guess, just kind of verify what the previous guy had said? Like they're just passing it on in a way?
So all 3 of these are written by the same guy, and he continually contradicts himself. The 1952 one especially, but I'll get into that in a second. And it mentions that sometime in 1947, George and Jennie came to the fire marshal's office, quote, very much distraught, and as a result, it was very hard to get a coherent statement from either one. And that's when they told him of the magazine picture that they believed to be Betty.
These don't seem like they can get their thoughts together when they need to.
Oh, they were incredibly smart people.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
I mean, the dude started his own. Immigrants who come over and started their own business are some of the most intelligent, hardworking people to ever exist. And that's not an easy thing to do. So come on. Who's he related to? Is his name Janatulo? Daggone it. I'm going to get that name. No disrespect, Italian. My wife's Italian.
It's Janudalo.
Janudalo. Okay.
I thought it was Janatolo, and I kept saying that. And then my Nana was like, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I was like, the guy. And she was like, Janudalo. And I was like, how was I supposed to know that?
Yeah. Yeah, my mother-in-law is Italian, so Janutolo. I know if she listens to this, she'll definitely correct me, which is needed.
The Sodders contacted Attorney General Ira Partlow, who, after talking with Fire Marshal Raper, agreed that the fire marshal was accidental, but suggested that the Sodders be allowed to publish this theory just in case. And due to this newspaper publicity, a man named Leonard Lair of the radio program We the People visited Fayetteville in hopes of covering the case, but changed his mind after speaking with, quote, reputable people in and around Fayetteville, unquote. Lair told a newspaper on January 31st, 1949, that he discovered through interviews that the following men opposed the theory that the children did not die in the fire: prosecuting attorney Carl Vickers, F.J. Morris, coroner W.H. Level, and Clemente Giulo. And then
the prosecutor, the coroner, and then him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, hate to point fingers. I'm not going to. I mean, I'm going to say percentage chance when we end this. I'm going to say percentage of this one, 98%. Go ahead.
And then they talk about the excavation done in 1949, and they mention the bones, but they don't mention that they were ruled out. Even though in 1950 he says these bones cannot be considered relevant to this case.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm talking about, him contradicting himself. He said, in spite of the pathologist indicating that the bones found were human, Mr. Sodder did not seem satisfied. And I already talked about that. And then Fire Marshal Raper writes to Senator Rushdie Holt on April 4th, 1950, and says, about 3 years after the fire occurred, this department, as well as the authorities of Fayette County, had decided the fire was of accidental origin, and the 5 children met their death. Mr. and Mrs. Sodder conceived the idea that the children had been kidnapped and had not died in the fire. So they're trying to say that they didn't decide it was accidental until 3 years later, even though they never did an investigation until 1950. And the original DPS report says it was accidental and caused by faulty wiring. So again, contradicting themselves.
Yeah.
And then again, he says bones were found that in the opinion of this pathologist were human. Still, Mr. Sodder was not satisfied. And then they say this old couple has allowed these private detectives to keep this case stirred up and has paid them many hundreds of dollars for investigations that have no merit. So they called them old. They were like in their 50s, I think.
I mean, back then.
Yeah, but still.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the final report, it's titled Supplementary Report, dated January 25th, 1952, and it's only 3 pages. So the report starts with saying, your investigators resumed the investigation of the above named case after a conference was held with Mr. Sodder and Sergeant Rieger of the state police in our office. Mrs. Sodder was interviewed at her home on the above date. She states that at the time of the fire, they were satisfied that the 5 children had perished in the flames. Then about 2 months after the basement was filled in with dirt, she and her husband conjured that the children did not perish in the flames, but were kidnapped or murdered. Then the following is under the section titled Statements. Mrs. Sodder stated that her suspicions were first aroused when Mrs. Emma Shockey, a neighbor, brought her son to meet the school bus, which stopped in front of the Sodder home. Mrs. Sodder also stated that, at the time, Mrs. Shockey told her she was afraid that her child might be kidnapped. Mrs. Sodder states further that she received information through T.C. Simmons that Reverend Frame had called the home of Mrs. Gar Davis and instructed them to put ice on the liver or what remains were found in the debris, at which time the weather was near zero. Reverend Frame was interviewed the same day as this report and stated he went to the scene of the fire on the morning of December 25th, 1945, where he met the Sodder family. He held prayer with them and did his utmost to console them in their grief. While at the scene of the fire, one of the persons searching the debris handed him a part of an internal organ about the size of his fist. It appeared to him to be part of a lung and was waterlogged. He placed the mass on a piece of stovepipe near the scene and left it there. He did not remain at the scene for any length of time due to the extreme cold weather. He states he never made any telephone calls to the home of Mrs. Davis, as alleged by various private investigators. And he also states that when he arrived at the scene of the fire, the basement was a blazing inferno, but it's unclear when he arrived that day. And then Mrs. Davis states that to her personal knowledge, Reverend Frame never made any calls to her house, and if he talked to anyone at her home, they made no mention of it to her. Mrs. Imashaki states that she took her son, 6 years of age, to the school bus so that he would become accustomed to meeting the bus alone and observe safety precautions. She stated that she never, at any time, discussed the subject of kidnapping of her children or the Sodder children with Mrs. Sodder. And they add, Mrs. Shockey is a young housewife, mother of three, and a very intelligent lady.
Oh, nice.
And then,
But
okay.
the Sodders are old.
Right.
Yeah.
The Sodders are old.
And then, Mr. Carl B. Vickers, prosecuting attorney for Fayette County, was interviewed at his office in Fayetteville, West Virginia on January 25th, 1952. He states that he saw the mass of internal organs recovered from the debris and instructed Mr. F.J. Morris, volunteer fire chief from Fayetteville, to dispose of the remains.
What are you talking about?
Number one, why the heck would you tell someone to dispose of remains? And why would you admit to it? And two, just a reminder that in the 1950 report, F.J. Morris admits he did not tell anyone about the mass he found. And at the end of this report, it says, to date, it has been established that 4 people saw some remains of the bodies, namely Jimmy Cipriani, Carl B. Vickers, F.J. Morris, and Reverend James F. Frame.
Are they all related to the dude?
Not related, like familial, but they were friends of his. Yes.
Gotcha. This is crazy.
They were all-
I mean, they should go to prison for that. You find guts, and then you're like, hide the guts.
But they didn't. They didn't find
I mean,
it.
yeah.
They didn't
That's what I'm
find
saying.
any of this.
This is like
They just added this. They just had to cover their butts, basically, and we're like, oh, well, actually, yeah, remains were found. We just didn't tell you guys. We just didn't tell you guys. And the fact that they're trying to cover up for Chief Morris finding that mass, they're like, oh, well, yeah, he did show it to somebody. Even though in the 1950 report, he says, no, I didn't show it to
hey,
anybody.
Harry, look at this liver, man. This is
Yeah.
crazy. Let's put
How
it
do
in a
you-
box and bury it 6 feet underground. This is crazy. The fact that someone would think this will be the explanation.
I found a liver.
Yeah, I found the liver. I put it in a box. I buried it underground.
Okay, so before I get into my theory, you have anything you want to say?
I mean, here's the thing. I can't say definitively what happened, obviously. I don't know. What I think I do know is that A, the parents weren't involved. B, Janudalo most likely knew about it. To what extent? I don't know. About the insurance, the Mussolini thing. Italians take things really serious. I know, because you better do dishes at this house. But you better reload the paper towels when they're empty. I'm just saying.
That's just good
Better put the dish
manners,
towel
though.
back where it
yeah.
was.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, you better do it here. But anyway, I love you, Jenna. So I'm sorry, I'm squirreling out. But I that's really all I know. I think that there is a cover up most likely to some extent. Now, why? I don't know. I don't know.
And I've seen people be like, well, Janudalo had money. Like, there's no way he did this. He had money. Money is not the only motive, people. Like, power, just he got his feelings hurt somehow by George. Who knows? But, just because he has money doesn't mean, one, that he doesn't want more. And two, that, like, it doesn't mean that he's not going to do something just because he has money.
This happens today. There's riots in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all this stuff just popping up, and you have all these people. It's like, oh yeah, we found some remains.
Yeah.
But we felt it right to hide them. Like, what?
I think the motive, that's what
That's the thing. Yeah.
the reports, there's so many inconsistencies. But like, that's the one question that like they never really tackled, I feel like, was like, what was the motive? And also like, you kidnap 5 kids and like transporting possibly only 4.
Logistically, it's very tough.
We don't all have SUVs.
So the motive more than likely was just revenge, really. Like it was more than likely he wanted to get back at George for whatever reason.
But why take those kids?
Because they were the youngest, and because younger kids are easier to manipulate. Because the kids that were taken were age 5 to 14,
Right.
and then the youngest child was 4, and she slept in her parents' room. They wouldn't have been able to get her. And then older than 14, you have Ted, who was 16, Marion, who was 17, and John, who was like 22. So they are all 3 older, and you wouldn't be able to convince them, and you would have it's much easier to shove 5 small kids into a car, especially back then, than it would be to take all of them.
But who do we think has the kids? Because obviously, like, the family members, like, they're going to be watched, so like they can't take the kids. Like,
and also, how do you go into a house at night?
It's not necessarily that they couldn't take the kids, because remember, in the immediate aftermath, they thought the kids were dead, so nobody was looking for them.
right.
So
how do they get in there without making so much noise?
okay, I'll get it. So the real mystery isn't whether the children died in the fire or not. It's whether, which they didn't. I'm saying that right now.
I don't think so either.
So the real mystery is, were the kids part of the plan, or was the plan just to burn the house down? So I think that, like I mentioned earlier, no matter what theory is true, Maurice likely did not live very long. I think that even if the kids were part of the plan, I don't think that he was. Just because he was so much older, and you can't really tell from the picture, but like from what I was told, he was a tall kid. Like he was a pretty big kid, and he's the only like threat. He's the only threat, because the other kids could be.
He'd be the one on the far.
Yeah,
Far
he's
left.
the one on the far left.
And let's can we look up the ages so we can kind of recap the ages of these kids?
14, 12, 9, 8, and 6.
That's from left to right?
Yes, left to right.
Oh man, that's the only thing is, like, logistically, how do you get in this house? Because it's a smaller house.
I don't think. Okay, I'm gonna get into it.
Sure.
Yeah. So these kids were like incredibly close and like practically inseparable. So like if they had been asked to stay up late, it's completely plausible that Maurice would have been like, oh yeah, I want to stay up with you guys. So if they weren't part of the plan, then what more than likely happened is that the kids went outside to do their chores, and they just so happened to go out there the same time as the people that showed up to set the house on fire. And that the people just had to react quickly, and they had to take them.
And what were their outside chores?
Just closing up the chicken, like putting the chickens up, and like I think they had other animals too. But from what I've been told, like they would have all gone together. Like even if they didn't need to, so Lewis and Jenny were like besties. Like they were always together. If one of them was somewhere, the other one was with them. So and Martha was, kind of like,
Middle child.
The mother, like she took care of the younger kids. She was always in charge of the younger kids. So, she would have went out there with them. So they would have all went outside to do the chores together. So it's possible that the people showed up to set the fire, the kids saw them, and they had to take them. And Maurice was probably killed pretty quickly. And then they just shuffled the other kids around. And that's why they were seen in a hotel in Charleston. And then after a few days, they just couldn't decide what to do to them. So they probably killed them and disposed of their bodies where they would never be found. So that's one theory.
Here's the thing. If all that happens, why the sketchy cover up?
Because they didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, why, like, golly, you talk about some Satanist type individual. Well, I mean, like some evil people.
Well,
a bunch of them.
I don't think that it was the original plan to, like, I don't think they went into this planning to kill the kids, but they probably didn't know, because if they weren't part of the plan, they didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
And so they felt like they had no choice.
So they were going to, okay, as in specifically, who do you think set the fire? Do you want to say?
I'm not going to get into that because I don't have definitive proof. I do have an idea, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, this is all, I mean, listen, none of this is going to solve anything, but
whoever it was probably known and trusted by the kids. I will say that.
And you're assuming that they want to set the fire to just destroy the house, but they assumed everyone would make it out.
Yes. So I believe the phone call was both a warning and a signal. So I think the call was a warning in a way that, to make sure Jennie would be awake, somebody would be awake in order to, sense the fire.
Right.
But also a signal so that whoever was outside, like they wouldn't have been able to hear the phone ring, but they would have been able to see Jennie go answer the phone through the window.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their signal. Hey, get going, set the fire.
But how do they know though? Because there's no cell phones. Like how they may see her. I mean, they'd have to call from a neighbor's house or something.
Yeah. Well, the bar was really close by. It's believed that the call was made from the bar.
Okay. So how close was the bar?
Relatively close. Yeah. I don't know, like feet or anything, but like
probably couldn't see the house.
Probably couldn't see the house. No, but more than likely, it would have been somebody could have came and dropped them off, and then, but this more leads towards them being part of the plan, which I believe they were part of the plan, because in Janulo's threat, he says, your house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed.
I mean, obviously,
which is essentially what happened. Like, they destroyed every trace of those kids.
And to go back, where did that come from? Who said that?
Janulo.
Okay. Who said that? He said that.
Oh, George.
Yeah.
I think the kids left on purpose? Is that what you're saying? Or what do you mean?
So, yes. So I think that they were told ahead of time to stay up late that night. I think that Martha was told to keep her younger siblings awake for, whatever reason, like, a surprise party, or, we need help getting presents for your family, or, whatever. I believe they were told by a trusted person that, and I will say that what I believe was also believed by George and Jennie. So,
yeah.
I believe that they were told by a trusted person that they needed to stay up late that night, and that they, for whatever reason, and not to tell their parents because it was going to be a surprise. And that, and then the person came and picked them up and then took them somewhere for the night. And then the next day, because that lady did say they were at her house that day. And I believe that they were then told that their whole house had burned down and that they were orphans.
Yeah.
And then that they were, what happened to that after is like anyone's guess. I don't think they stayed in the United States. I think that more than likely, if we are to believe that they were in Cortez at some point, I believe it was in order to send them out of the country. Because, from Florida, you could have gotten on a boat and gone to Italy. So I believe that they were, they were just put on a boat and sent to Italy. I don't believe that they were kept together. I believe that they were separated and more than likely sold into slavery. I don't think that I would love to believe they lived long, happy lives and had their own families, but more than likely that's not the case. It's possible that Betty was adopted since she was, 5. But the older ones more than likely, like I said, Maurice, either theory, I don't believe Maurice made it. But the rest of them, like Martha especially, was probably sold as like a child bride because that was a thing back then.
Would there have been any records though, if that's like from their journey to Italy, like 5 kids on a boat?
As far as I know, no. Like I wouldn't even know how to find out like which boats or like I wouldn't even know where to go for that information. But yeah, I believe that they were more than likely sent out of the country. And now there was a sighting, which I don't believe the specific sighting, but there was a sighting of Martha in a convent in Texas. So the convent theory is also possible. That did happen back then. Like they could have sent some of the kids to a convent and they could have just grown up, believing that their whole family was dead and they just never, or, if they did survive for a long time, they were more than likely told that they were more likely threatened.
Man, that's the thing that's getting me is the age.
Mhm.
The age, they're so, because I got a comment, someone asking about Beulah, Georgia Tan. Have you heard the name? She's like a baby seller from back then.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I
In
know her.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
So they're like,
That's also a theory.
do you
yes.
think, but like these kids are, they're not babies.
That's
They're
what I'm saying.
babies.
That's why I
Right.
believe they were sold. Like I really believe that they were probably sold because that's really the only way to
Mhm.
make sure that they can't ever come back. Even if they believed that their whole family was dead, like it just getting them adopted out wouldn't stop them from wanting to come back to like see the site or see their
Yeah.
graves or something. But like
Mhm.
if they were sold or if they were like given to people like that were connected to whoever did this, and to make sure that they were kept in line the rest of their lives.
Mhm.
That's what I believe happened.
What's like the possibility that the like officials involved were like this happened on like Christmas?
Mhm.
It was cold. Like what?
Yeah, it's
How
Christmas
does
Eve.
it play into like maybe like they just conducted a bad investigation and then some of this, at least part of this, was just to cover up the fact that maybe it was just a bad investigation.
We got egos, and when they start getting told they're wrong,
right?
I mean that too.
like they try to go back later, but like I'm imagining like
which happens
they're
today.
understaffed. It's the holidays. They don't want to be out there. It's a fire. They think it's an open and shut case. Like,
Yeah.
Well, but
How
also like the fact that the fire marshal lied about being there just points to a cover up.
Oh man,
like
the guts thing.
and the fact that the prosecuting attorney told the newspaper that day that they found bones when they didn't.
Yeah.
That they found bones and then buried them, but
Right.
then when they did the excavation, there wasn't a container with bones in them.
And there was a report that's saying that 4 people said they
Said they
found
found her
guts and hid it.
Yeah. But do you think that like
Yeah.
that
Is
was
that a quote?
said
Yeah.
to like make it seem like they had conducted the thorough
Yes, yeah.
investigation? Just not even maybe outside of wanting to have kidnapped
Because,
the kids, but just to say like, oh no, like we need to make sure that like the investigation is solid. Like we'll just say we found like that way.
Yeah. Well, so I
know,
believe that,
potentially.
whenever the people that did this planned this out, they never thought that George and Jennie were going to fight back, period. Like they probably thought that George and Jennie were just going to either accept that their kids died or that they were going to be too scared to speak out about it. And so they never expected to have to do an investigation.
Yeah.
And so when George and Jennie kept pushing and pushing and pushing and they were forced to, they just kind of had to make stuff up and act like they did do an investigation. And that's why they said, oh yeah, well, we were there that day. We did do an investigation. You guys just won't listen.
I think you're onto something there, Josie, about egos. I think there's a combination of things
Right.
going on. There was something nefarious that happened. I do not believe the kids died in the fire. I think the investigation potentially was a bunch of egomaniacs not wanting to admit they're wrong. Because, we see it today. There's people that'll get up in court and say Humalog doesn't kill a body. We see this today.
I mean, it could have been too that like they went in with the assumption that like it happened. It was an act, what?
Yeah.
And so that they built the whole case with whatever assumption that the kids are dead already.
Yeah.
I've like that's happened too, where like you go in already thinking one thing, and all the evidence you gathered, you make sure it supports your theory.
Yeah. Like we
So-
know today the impossibility of these bodies disappearing in
Yeah.
this fire, but did they then?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Will you pull up the bullet points I sent you?
Yep. I got it.
So scroll up. Also, we'll talk about that in a second, but I found a bunch of other fires from that time where remains were found.
Right.
Yeah. Which we brought up a few. There was a few you brought up.
But this those were those all after, or were any of them before?
Some of them were before.
Okay.
Yeah. So this section. So go up to the top of this section. So this is all connections between all the people involved in this case and the Janulos.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Lot of information. We need to write a blog.
I've been thinking about it.
Yeah. Would you do
know.
that?
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
I'll put it on the site. We have a blog now. I mean, obviously, I think more than likely this dude knew than not. I mean, you almost have to prove he didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Just look at all those bullet points, how they're all connected.
Yeah, and it's different things. Like for those listening, it says prosecuting attorney Carl Vickers, C.G. Giannullo, and J.D. Schultz were members of a committee for the Crippled Children's Society, 1938.
And F.G. Giannullo and Carl Vickers were part of the September Born Club. And J.D. Schultz, C.G. Giannullo, and Rosser Long were guests at the annual meeting. And I was able to find, every year that they met, all of them were there every single year.
Yeah. I mean, there's FG and CG. Are they brothers?
No, that's the cousin. So Forenzo Giannullo and Cliente Giannullo.
Gotcha.
I just shortened it. But
and then the main one is the head cheese is
Forenzo.
Just a
Forenzo.
club of people born in September.
Yes. So they were friends. They were friends. All these people were friends. They were in various committees. They were members of they went to church together. They
Which is what you
were
would
members
assume in a
of the
small town.
lodge, and so all of these people were,
Why do you think that
good old boys,
George and Jennie? Why do you think they weren't in the club? Why do you think they weren't part of?
Well, so George and Giannullo were friends when he worked for him, and then once George decided to create his own business, Giannullo got upset, and basically they stopped being friends.
Why do you have insurance policy in someone else's name and it's your house?
So George asked Giannullo to co-sign on a loan for the house, and Giannullo said he would only do it if he was made beneficiary of the house insurance.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Why ask to raise the house insurance? And why get mad when they won't raise the house insurance? And then why raise it anyways without telling the owner of the house? And
market change?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
how long
then.
Do you know when they bought the house?
They bought the house in 1935.
Okay.
Or they built the house. They bought the land and built the house.
I mean, I don't know, maybe difference in when the house was valued then compared to later years. I don't know.
Or he was planning to burn the house down.
I mean, there's that.
And he wanted more money out of it.
But what about the kids, though? I just don't. That just sounds so exhausting.
I don't know. They were mad at Giannullo. And, we got to remember his full threat. Okay. His full threat was that, he said, I see that you have refused to take out insurance and you have refused to sign the papers for Mrs. Sodder's father's estate. What did that have to do with him?
Yeah.
How did he know that George, and I was able to confirm George did not sign that paper.
Yeah.
So, which kept, kept it from being completed and kept from being paid out. But what did that have to do with Giannullo? Why did he even know about it? And why did he mention it in the threat? That's just more, motive for.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not good on the resume.
Mm-hmm.
It's, because that just, I'm thinking okay, well, I don't know what a sociopath does or a psychopath, but, when you take the kids' ages into account, you take the size of the house. Now, I think most likely the idea of them getting out of the house beforehand is somewhat possible. It's just like,
well, and so many
crazy.
people are like, so many people either assume that the kids went upstairs that night, which we have no proof of, or they assume that the people had to have gone into the house and taken the kids out of there. And the kids had to go outside.
Well, they got a 14-year-old. I mean, they could have ran outside to play or like.
Exactly. Like, and people are like, well, why didn't the parents wake up? Well, even if they did wake up to hear the door shut, they weren't immediately like, oh, somebody's stealing our kids, because the kids had to go outside to do the chores. So they would have just been like, oh, the kids are going outside to do the chores, and they would have fallen back asleep. They wouldn't have thought anything of it, of hearing a door shut,
Yeah. Plus Italians sleep, son. I'm just telling you. Like,
what's that like for you now? Like George Sodder did this pamphlet and it says why. And, obviously like the same questions he had have gone unanswered. Like now you have them, you've carried it on.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's that like for you? Like you have all these questions, you've somewhat answered them, you have theories, but like, we're never really going to know.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's that like for you now, being able to share it, but also coming up with like the same questions?
I just wanted to get the truth out there. There's so many times over the years, people have told this story and they've told it wrong. And I just think that George and Jennie deserve for the correct story to be out there. And, their granddaughter Jennie told me that it was their wish for this story to survive beyond them. And that's what I'm doing. I think that's what they deserve. And, even if we never find out exactly what happened to them, George, Jennie, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty deserve to be talked about, and they deserve for people to know that this wasn't just a tragic accident. Like something happened to them.
Yeah.
And, and while we may never know, maybe we will. Maybe, maybe somebody, maybe in me doing this, somebody will reach out and be like, hey, I heard this. Hey.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of that.
Which actually I have. So this is mainly for people that grew up in Fayetteville or have lived in Fayetteville at some point or knew someone that did since 1945. But, if anything I talked about today sounds familiar, I set up an email. So it's 5sodderkids@gmail.com. So like, did you hear a rumor one time from somebody you trusted? Were you ever told something that you didn't believe, but, sounds plausible now? Or, I want to hear everything, even from firefighters that have an opinion or cremation experts, or, if you ever pulled over and took a picture of one of the billboards, I would love to see those. And I promise that everything would be kept anonymous. Like I'm not, you don't have to give your name or, the person's name that you learn this information from. Like I am not interested in ruining anybody's reputation. I just want to learn what happened to them if possible. And it's been 80 years and it's probably too late, but I think I owe it to them to try.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, the facts are strange enough. Like, who knows currently what happened, but just the facts of like, there would be evidence of bodies and there weren't. They found vertebrae that had not been in a fire after the fact. They had people, how many, who knows, actively saying they found missing remains and then hid the fact that they found them and hid and buried them. The letter from the governor saying y'all need to just calm down and like believe what we're telling you, even though there's no facts here to believe what we're telling you. That's just all that's just crazy enough.
Yeah. And so I wanted to mention a case that is more it happened in 2012, but it's like so similar to this that I have to bring it up. So I got this summary from, have you guys ever heard of the podcast Voices for Justice?
Sounds familiar. I don't.
So the person that does it, her name is Sarah Turney, and she created the podcast because her 17-year-old sister went missing. Her dad picked her up from school and she was never seen again. And she created this podcast in order to fight for justice for her sister. And her dad more than likely did it. But it's a nobody crime. They can't prove it. But I actually reached out to her, and I've gotten to talk to her, just privately a couple of times. And because she did an episode on the Sodder children, and she sent me this case because it's so similar. And so Chloe Leverett, age 9, and Gage Daniel, age 7, lived with their grandparents at a rural farmhouse near Unionville, Tennessee. On Sunday, September 23rd, 2012, a fire broke out that leveled the house to the ground. 2 sets of human remains, along with the remains of the family dog and the family bird, are found, but the children's remains are not. Law enforcement claims that everyone died in the fire and that the children's remains were just burned up, but the fire marshal disagrees. It took 63,000 gallons of water to extinguish the fire. Investigators are adamant that there were no signs of foul play and there is no reason to believe the children did not die in the fire, but fire experts disagree because if the kids were in the fire, there would be bones or teeth to prove it. So, that's just so, I'm not going to get into it more. So I recommend listening to the Voices for Justice podcast episode on it. She does a really good job. But it's just so similar. And if in 2012, the fire marshal's saying, okay, it's not possible for bodies to be burned up, then it wasn't possible 80 years ago either.
It's disrespectful to make them believe that.
Yes.
Try to believe that. It's like, of course they're going to keep on. They're like, what? I'm not an idiot.
Exactly.
How does it feel now for you as a kid, like saying, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to, obviously I'm sure like as a kid, you're like, I'm going to solve it. Cause that's what we do as kids. Like we dream big, but even still like everything that you've uncovered, everything, like all the reports, like how does it feel now? Like kind of accomplishing that, like not a dream, but like your vision for when you were a kid.
I mean, it feels good. Like I said, when I was younger, I thought that it was like actually a mystery. Like I thought that even George and Jennie like had no clue who did this. And then, once I started diving into it and I realized that, oh yeah, and actually it isn't that big of a mystery. They probably knew who did it. But when I was little and thought I was going to do it, I never imagined that I would have a whole binder full of stuff. Like I never imagined that, I would be able to get this stuff from Jennie, and I'm like so grateful to her that she supported me in doing this, because I wasn't sure if she would rather it just because her mom passed away a few years ago, and so I wasn't sure if she wouldn't want this to be done, but she's helped me so much throughout this whole thing, and I honestly wouldn't be here without her.
It's a crazy amount of legwork. Is anyone still around from back then? Do you know? I'd say probably not.
Probably not. No, I'm pretty sure everybody.
If they are, they'd be 100.
Yeah,
they may be, but shoo, man. Did we solve it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know for me, just having a general understanding was like you explained the Illuminati to me with all this stuff. This is crazy.
I'd say most of these reports have never been public. Like they've never been discussed. No. They've never really been talked about.
No, there's not. I mean, in
the History Channel, when they did it, they talked to Jennie and her brother, and they got permission to do it, and they even had some of the reports, and they would flash the reports on the screen, and then they would mention something that wasn't even in the reports. And so it's just like they just wanted to tell the story, and they didn't really care how they told it. And that's why I wanted to come on here and do this. I just wanted to I wanted to get all the facts out there because, a lot of people, especially back when Web Sleuths was big, like, back before the reports were even, known about, everybody had a theory. Everybody was like, oh, we know what happened. We know what happened. And even though they didn't have any information, they just had what had been published so far, which wasn't a lot.
What's the craziest theories that we can debunk right now?
Oh, so the craziest one I saw was that someone was like, oh, well, Marion bought them toys that night. Well, what if she thought she bought them a toy grenade, but she actually bought them a real grenade? And
they blew up.
And that they
I'm sorry to laugh.
That they took, listen, this is funny, that the kids went outside to go play with their toy grenade, and that they went to throw it on the house as a joke, and it blew up, and they got so scared that they just ran away. Are you kidding? I mean, for one, there wasn't an explosion. Okay, if it was a grenade, there would have been an explosion, and there would have been a big old hole in the house.
That one's pretty debunked.
And
but the remains stuff is almost as crazy as that to me. Like,
I've seen, alien abduction.
Mothman.
Yeah, I don't know.
West Virginia.
So I don't read the comments just because it's annoying.
Good for you.
But so many people, I've seen some people be like, oh yeah, the parents did it. They definitely killed their kids. And I'm like, oh, so they killed their kids and then they spent thousands upon thousands of dollars.
There's no way they would have held on so long.
Exactly. And another one is that they'll be like, oh, well, the kids ran away. The kids set the fire and they ran away.
Yeah.
So kids aged 5 to 14 came up with a plan on Christmas Eve in the middle of winter in West Virginia, where it snows and it's super cold. They came up with a plan to just run away with no money, no car, no nothing.
And not to mention they declined adding insurance for them.
Yeah.
So, that's just silly. What are they doing? I don't think they would have held on for so long. I think if that would have been a possibility, that someone would have brought it up, and they also wouldn't have stayed. So I don't think that they knew for sure.
They I mean, like we talked about, they believe from day one that the fire was not accidental.
Yeah.
So, and even though they did briefly believe,
and they said it in the paper. Yeah.
Even though they did briefly believe that their kids died in the fire, like, why wouldn't they? Why would they not believe what law officials tell them?
Yeah.
Like, know, and then they started putting everything together and they were like, wait a minute, all this stuff happened, like, or surrounding it. Like, this is really weird.
Crazy. Well, we're going to have to do a part 2, I guess.
Took longer than you thought, didn't it?
No, this was perfect. Yeah, this was perfect. I appreciate you coming in. And like you mention that email again for people.
Is it 5 spelled out? Or
no, just the number 5. Yeah. The number 5 and then Sodder Kids. And Sodder is spelled SODDER, kids @gmail.com.
Yeah, reach out to Miranda if you have any information.
Now, if your plan is to reach out to me and say, yeah, I have information, if you pay me, don't waste your breath.
Yeah, we ain't paying nobody.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But, like I said, anything you ever heard, if you grew up in Fayetteville, let me know. And I don't plan on, I'm not gonna be like, hey, this person told me this.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm not gonna believe every single email somebody sends me, but if I get the same tip like more than once.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Next time you go to climb that rock or ride some bike trail and buy your $8 latte in Fayetteville, remember, there's some dark stuff that's happened, and we got to get a monument going. I know we can do this.
The Janulos have a park.
Oh, cool. Okay.
The Janulos do, yeah.
Nice. At what park?
It's a little one. It's right next to Secret Sandwich Society.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, all right. Well, shout out to them. But if any of their family, like, no disrespect, if you know something, let's solve this thing.
80 years is not too late.
No, never. Everyone else, like I mentioned, if you notice Jozy's t-shirt, we have these available. Creepalachia.shop. We're taking pre-orders now. We have multiple colors. Good times. We're trying to pay some freaking bills up in here. We got to make this thing sustainable. But everyone else, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Creepalachia if you haven't. We're going to do more episodes like these. No time limit. We've crossed the 4-hour mark. And what do you think? Leave it below. I know you got some opinions on YouTube. Go ahead and comment. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, take a minute, leave a review. And when you hit that 5 stars, tell us what you think. Who knows? But anyway, other than that, everyone else, always remember, above all else, long live Appalachia.